Okay, I think we got it.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, please.
Good now? Okay. So the shortfall in that deficit is being projected between 8 and 9.4 million for the coming fiscal year, which starts July 1st. On a budget of roughly $80 million, that's a big number. We've done one-time solutions, including using reserves for this fiscal year, but those are exhausted going into next fiscal year.
So, ahorita el problema que tenemos es que el presupuesto de la ciudad de 80 millones de dólares, tenemos 8 a 9.4 millones que nos faltan para obtener. So, ahorita lo que van a hablar hoy son soluciones proponidas que pueden tener.
If you want, Rob, I could go sit next to him and just repeat what you're saying so we don't have to stop.
Whatever works. Is
Okay,
that
because
achieved?
then it's going to take longer this way, I think.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
So I'd go sit next to him and then
Okay.
translate.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
That works.
Wow, excellent.
Yeah.
There you go. Personal translation services. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Sounds good. All right, he's settled in. Okay, so let me get to the next slide. Here we go. So our costs are rising faster than our revenues. As I mentioned, we've used one-time funds for this current year at the direction of council. Instead of doing a massive cut, they were presented the option of a cut in the $8 million range for this fiscal year, which would have drastically changed all our services and removed many key features that our community loves. The council decided to have a one-time fix to see if there's alternatives to get more revenue instead of making those cuts. But those solutions are gone, and the one-time fixes are, we don't have additional revenues to take on for a future year. So we'll learn more about the specifics of that Lewis will share with us. But just to continue the takeaways here, we need new revenue going forward, and that can be hard because sales tax revenues are softening. They're not dropping drastically, but they're not going up at any great pace. We have pension obligations that come as part of our CalPERS system, and there's inflation that we've had in our personal lives that reach into our city lives. And with those, if without additional revenue, we then have to do severe cuts, and that will impact services provided to the city. And so we'll outline how that would look too. So this is just the intro. With that, we'll get to a discussion about our different revenue sources to help educate everyone on where does the money come from to fund the city. And with that, I'll kick that over to Lewis for him to take it away.
Great, thank you. So this is intended to just provide the audience high-level overview of where our funding comes from, especially for the general fund. And so why the general fund is important is because it funds our core services. It funds our police, our parks, public safety, community development. A lot of the key things that we do come from this pot of money. And this pot of money that we're talking about, as Rob mentioned earlier, is an $80 million bucket, roughly. And so we have that kind of money to operate our core services. Now, that's not the only money that the city receives. The city receives money primarily from grants and government agencies that fund and like water, sewer, but those are restricted funds. And so the focus is always going to be on the general fund. The discretionary revenues that we have are primarily limited to the property taxes that we receive, the revenue related to that, sales and use taxes. And there's some fees that we charge for services that also contribute to our revenue. Now, we're going to go over some of the numbers later, but one of the reasons why we're capped is because of Proposition 13, and it's limiting our ability to left. Okay, I found the sweet spot. I got it. So you guys have been looking at blank screen. I apologize. So a couple of things. General fund. How is the money split up? And this is looking at current year budget. 55.6% of our budget is spent on public safety, police services, and that's followed by parks, public works, community development, and down the line. So you'll see that combined between police and fire, that's a significant amount, about 70% of our revenue. And then going into revenue growth, talking about these funding sources. Keep forgetting here. This is a pie chart that just represents our revenue sources in a graphical way. So you'll see the bottom two slices, the orange and the dark green on the bottom. Those two represent. Sorry, where is our local sales tax, state sales tax? Yep, bottom, top right is our property, and then the sales tax at the bottom left. So our sales tax, you'll see from the sales tax slide, and I'm not sure why the rest of it is not coming up. There it is. The city of Southgate has a 1% measure that was passed that helps fund Measure P. It's the two green slices, and then they have the Bradley Burns local tax at 1%. So that 2% makes up our portion of the sales tax. We keep 2%. All the other agencies keep the rest. So on a taxable purchase of $100, roughly $2 of that stays with the city of Southgate.
I'll just punch in there, Louis. So this is a question. A lot of people will say, hey, I'm paying all these taxes to the city. Isn't that enough? And there's an assumption that if I pay 10.75 in Southgate, that's going to Southgate. If I go to Downey, I'm giving all my business to Downey. That's all going there. In reality, in this case, it's 2% of that stays in Southgate. 8.75 is going to everybody else. If you go to Downey, they have, I think they just passed a half cent. I think they get 1.5 instead of 2, but the rest is going to all these other agencies. So it's misleading to think 10.75 is coming to us. It's only 2%.
Yep. So transitioning over to property tax. So you'll see that this pie has a lot more slices, but our slice of this pie is 6%. So for every $1 of the basic 1% property tax, we receive about 6 cents. And again, I talked about Prop 13, but a lot of times folks ask, well, why can't you just raise that percentage, that 6.15%? But we're actually locked in. And that's something that we can't change without some legislative efforts. But as of now, our slice of the property taxes is 6%. Now, property taxes tend to be more stable than your sales tax. Property taxes tend to go up incrementally year over year. And, whenever a home is reassessed or sold, that tends to bump up the property tax paid for a property. But in general, it's just something that is fixed.
I'll just punch in again there. So an example of a $500,000 home, $500,000, you buy the house, property tax is generally 1%. So per year, 1%, $5,000 would be your property tax bill. Again, I'm a resident going, I'm paying a huge amount of tax already. Why does the city need more? Well, how much gets to us as the city for all the services you use? Using that 6% number, $300. $4,700 are going to everybody else. So it's a mere pittance. The 6% is, we'll see a graph later, it's the lowest in the cellar region of our share, unfortunately. Frozen, we're not allowed to increase it. but it really gives people the wrong impression when they think their tax dollars are coming to Southgate. It's such a small amount.
Great. And again, why does this matter? So all of the funding sources that I just talked about, property tax and sales tax and fees, that's what funds our park maintenance, our police, our emergency response, our parks, and it's what's used to deliver these services, these core services. Now, sales taxes tie revenue to local economic activity. So the more attractive we are as an economic driver, the more we can drive business here, the better it is for us. But again, and we'll look at it later. Even if you open a ton of Chick-fil-A's that are really popular, it's still not going to be enough to cover our deficit alone. So I'm going to shift over here to talk about our costs. And this is important because it helps maybe not tell the full story, but it helps tell the most of the story in terms of why we have this gap. Now, the city has done quite a bit of work in the last year to reduce expenditures. This budget that passed this year, department heads were asked to make about $2 million in cuts. And the departments are continuously looking for ways to save the city money. But all of those efforts, no matter how drastic we go without cutting services, are not enough. And we can talk about that a little bit later on. But the shortfall that we're estimating is between 8 million and 9.4 million for fiscal year 26-27. And to maintain the current level of services into the future, the city needs an influx of approximately $10 million annually to bridge that gap. Now, that would provide some cushion for some capital projects and some deferred maintenance needs. But we're hoping that we get somewhere along the 8 to $9.4 million mark to help us balance the budget. Increased cost drivers, pensions are a big deal. We'll talk a little bit about them. Insurance premiums and inflation are some of the key drivers of these costs. So prior year, why did costs go up compared to this year? Well, many vacant positions were filled. The use of ARPA money in prior years was used to offset the deficit, to cover for it, really. The use of ARPA money in prior years is no longer an option, but it has been used in prior years to offset the cost of our salaries for public safety, which is an allowable cost under ARPA regulations. There's also increases in our unfunded actuarial liabilities. This is the money that we owe for pensions that are accrued due to our staff that we have now and staff that we've had in the past. Health insurance increases. Those are going up not only for folks at home, but also for the city. And of course, insurance premiums, especially on the general liability side. This is a growing trend, not just impacting Southgate, but all municipalities that are insured through different groups. We're a part of a pool, a risk pool. There's also increases in cost for labor, goods, and services. A lot of the contracts that we have built in CPI increases, so the contracts go up year over year, but those increases, the CPIs often exceeds or is at par with our revenue increases, so it's really hard to keep up. We have our non-controllable costs. So these are, I talked about them again, but non-controllable costs also includes unfunded actuarial liabilities, and I'll talk a little bit why it's on both sides. And that's essentially because it's something we can control in many ways, depending on what our CalPERS contract looks like. But what we end up paying is dictated by CalPERS, not by us. Our health insurance premiums and all that stuff. So if we can go into the next slide, I'll go into a little bit more details here related to our personnel. And one of the questions that we get often is, well, If we're in a deficit, why do we keep providing increases to personnel? This graph is intended to show you the historical increases that we provided to our staff since 2019-20 to 24-25. And the top row shows our revenue increases for the corresponding years, averaged out on the right side. And so the MOU average increases have been about 2.97, below CPI, and the general fund revenue growth has averaged about 4.37. So that is a healthy margin in terms of what the increases are and as opposed to our revenue growth. Over the last 5 years, like I said, it's been pretty steady in terms of our revenue growth of about 4% versus the increases at 3%. Next slide here.
I'll just
Go
add,
ahead.
so the second row there is when we say MOU average increases, that's the average of all the staff when they've gotten raises. Averaged over those 6 years is 2.97%. So people will say, basically 80% of our budget is staff. That's who provides the services. That's the police officer, that's the Parks and Rec person, the lifeguard, that's the front counter person. That is our services. We don't have, like a car dealership has a small amount being staff and a whole much is the car inventory or mechanic equipment. It's staff. So it's like we're paying our staff so much, that's causing the gap. But you can see here that the raises being given are below the actual growth of revenue. So if we were extremely, if the raises were causing all the gap, we'd see that number be much higher per year. On average, that would be in excess of the revenue growth. So certainly it adds costs, but it, compared to what I've seen at some agencies, I think it's been a moderate growth that's paired closely to the CPI versus large raises.
Yeah. And then this table goes into these cost drivers that we talk a lot about at City Council, with City Council, and internally with our executive team. The unfunded pension liability in 2019-20, we were paying $6 million a year towards our pension liability. Looking at the current year, that bill has grown to $10.3 million. That's an increase of about $4.3 million over the course of this time period. Our health insurance costs, 2019-20, 3.34, 3.3, sorry, and then the current year is 5.5. And rather than going line by line, I just want to highlight some of the totals and changes in yellow. You'll see highlighted in yellow and red text. The growth in all of these categories, looking just at 2020 to 2025, that's about $10.8 million. So if you go to the next slide, it just kind of summarized it for you all. Our cost in fiscal year 2019-20 was 11.9 in just these 4 categories. In fiscal year 25-26, the same 5 categories or 4 categories are costing us 22.7 million. That's a 90% change, and a difference of 10.8 million that the city has had to absorb. And the city has done that through reduction in expenses in order to be able to accommodate this. But at some point, and that's where we're at now, we can't just continue cutting and cutting without impacting services. We can always cut, but there's going to be an impact to services. This is just a visual. So the revenue line in the blue for street lighting and landscape fund is pretty flat. Again, it's been a very long time since this has increased. And you'll see the costs on the orange line just continue to go up. And you'll see similar things in other line graphs for the other categories if you go on to the next slide.
And I'll just give an example here of many costs. You've seen, where is all the cost increase if it's not the salaries? If the salaries are 3% a year, growth's 4%, we shouldn't be running into $8 or $9 million in deficit. But you see these other particular highlighted areas where you have a $10 million or a 90% growth over 6 years. That's where the real cost escalators are. And we all, on a parcel tax for residents, they pay for street lighting landscape on our parcel tax. It's a small amount. When it was put in place in the 90s, there was no CPI added. So it's a flat amount to pay for tree trimming, street work, and our like median landscaping, that type of thing. It's isolated for that. But with no CPI, it sat at that number, virtually $2 million for 30 something years, which doesn't make any sense at all. So the costs have gone way up. And one of the big factors there is the state government. So for instance, when we first had tree trimming 6 years ago, the contract for doing the whole 1 year term of tree trimming was $500,000 for a contractor because it was a low bid contract, but the state imposed on all cities that they had to now provide prevailing wage rather than low bid. Didn't ask the cities their opinion, didn't provide funding to cover that. So an unfunded mandate came, and our contract cost for this year for the same tree amount of trimming, 1.1 million. So that's more than double, beyond our control. Street sweeping also converted from low bid to prevailing wage. And these are examples of what's causing this orange line to balloon without any control from the city. Whoops, I'll get back to next slide. There you go.
Yep. So here you'll see our UAL steady increase going up. We have different plans, so everyone's
Oh.
different, but our liability insurance is one of those that are just skyrocketing. Again, this is due to a system that favors those who sue, especially those that sue government agencies. The payouts that cities are having to make, the settlements are high if it gets to jury, and the jury is awarding. Juries are very generous in giving away money that's not theirs. So that's a driver of these general liability insurance costs.
And in addition, the insurance industry in general, due to all the disasters nationwide, have cranked. If you have homeowners insurance, if you have car insurance, you've just seen those rates balloon. And so the city has a large version of that. And those increases are in the 20% a year versus what our revenue growth is.
And then our health insurance costs that we provide to our employees, we're part of a pool. We contract with the states, with CalPERS for health benefits, which is the best thing we can do because we're not small, we're not big enough to compete competitively in the market for health insurance. And very common for agencies to contract for health insurance, but you'll see that health insurance costs have just ballooned since 23-24, and they're projected to go up. They tend to go up roughly 10% per year on a good year, but many years it's more than that. And that's kind of it in a visual. You just constant growth in all of these areas. And the long story short is that there are significant gaps between the revenue that we see every year and we anticipate to receive every year and the cost of doing business. And so one of the things that I talked to Rob about a lot is, how are we going to make sure that the budget that we present in future years are balanced? And so, Rob's going to get into a couple of paths that we have moving forward.
Thank you, Louis. So 2 paths forward. I hinted at them at the beginning of the presentation. If we want to maintain our current services with a structural deficit, we need to fill that gap with enough money to cover that gap, $8 to $9 million. That keeps our services where they are. If we don't have that revenue, then we move to significant reductions and a cut of services of $8 to $9 million in order to balance the budget. So we'll highlight that exercise. at the end of last fiscal year, as we were developing the budget and saw this large deficit, we presented to council a plan. At the time, we tried our best to put together how we could cut services and still keep basic services there. We didn't get to 8 million. We got to 6.5 million and still cutting many, many things people love. But at the time, before we did further cut planning, the council decided that they would use this extra year here to avoid those serious cuts. So we did a $2 million version. And we wanted more time to really think through those cuts and see if there's another way. So you'll take a brief look at that old plan. We are currently, as a staff, looking at specific plan of $9 million in cuts. So we're going department by department to figure out how that would look and what the impacts would be. And we'll be presenting the results of that plan, draft plan, at our January 13th council meeting. So we'll have all the cuts that would be needed and all the services that would be dropped. But what you see for tonight is simply, we'll give you the example of the June concept to give a lighter version of where this could be. So here's just some of the items that were on the list in June. Again, we will revise this and it'll have to be tougher if we're going to go the cut route. But we have to eliminate position in our very lean IT department. We're delaying our tech projects, slow our master tech plan as we're trying to modernize our systems. Money to do that modernization goes away. Money to replace things when we should be, to keep up to date with our security measures, to keep from being infiltrated. All that is compromised. We would have less finance leadership, less positions that can cover our financial reporting and needs, public works, engineering, less people to work on all our projects, including even the grant funds we get. Our engineers are leaders in filling out all the grants and getting the money that's free, but it takes hard work by staff to lobby, to fill out the applications, to answer the processes, and then handle the projects. Because even if the money's free, the oversight requires staff to work through all the on-site issues, managing of the contracts. We would have to cut that, and that can have a magnifier effect of making us unable to pursue many of these grants we pursued in the past to build parks and fix roads. And then in our facility maintenance, right now we have buckets that rotate throughout the city hall to cover the water every time it rains, which is, I think if anyone had that in their home, they'd want their landlord to, compensate them or condemn them. We need to fix that. It just creates more damage over time and creates even a bigger problem. But, we've got probably close to $1 million would be the cost to get that roof fixed. These are things that we can't just, kick down the road forever. We had non-functioning heating and air conditioning in this building, in our police department, and our failing at our Parks and Rec department, our rec center. And so we've worked over the last 2 years to spend the money to get that fixed. We were spending $400,000 per year for temporary air conditioning to come in the summer so we could keep the buildings open. Because if it gets, if it's 90 degrees in our police chief's office and hotter in our dispatch center, we can't have people functioning, and we can't expect them to be working when our customers are coming in and sweating at our counters. It's not like there's a minimum standard we have to try to get to. And so spending $400,000 a year for 10 years is $4 million. If we we'll get the final numbers, but it's more in the $2 million total to fix all of those systems and stop paying for that rental. But we get criticized. You're spending $2 million. Why? Of the taxpayers' money. Why are you doing that? Just like you have a home. You can't just not have, you have to do basic maintenance, and so those things they've been deferred forever. I'd say too long, because, we don't have the money, but then you end up paying even more to have to repair it later. So these are tough things. The decay keeps coming, and the maintenance is still needed, but the budget's not there. Our school crossing guards, many people think the schools pay for that. We have over 40 crossing guards, and they cost the city, not the school district, $750,000 a year. That's a huge amount of money. They're beloved by everyone who has kids. Every parent group wants 5 or 6 more per school. But it's a luxury we're not going to be able to afford in a future cut world. And that's not great, but we've talked to the school district. They say they don't, they'll say they don't have the money and they don't want to do it. So they're not going to. So that would be a very visible loss. This is a light cut. Again, looking at a $6.5 million, we were proposing closing the pool in the winter season, closing it on Fridays, but not the whole year. Looking at our golf course, closing a couple days a week, eliminating free play, charging people in the summer. We're just trying to do some reductions, but just in the hint of that, we had the council chambers with 50 parents and their kids on the school in this swim program saying, not us. We had a bunch of golfers here as well saying, not us. And that's just not even a closure. This future $9 million plan, we would have to close the pool completely. We would have to close the golf. We'll get the specific plan in January, but the magnitude's greater. And the tough part is every area of our city may not be used by an individual. So they're like, I don't have kids in school. I don't need crossing guards. You're a parent with kids at school. There's no way that's going. But you know what? I don't use the pool. Cut the pool. Pool people connect to the pool. I don't use the fields. It's the fields. I never do a building or a development program. So cut over there. Well, you ask the business community or anybody who's now going to wait like 3 months for a turnaround instead of a week. They're saying, don't cut there, cut somewhere else. So I've been through this process at other cities, and every little thing has a stakeholder group attached to it. So these conversations are tough, and but this is the path we're looking at if we have to do this. Special events, they're great, they're loved, they're just thousands of people that come to that, but that's when you talk about, do we have to get rid of some of that extra things that make Southgate, but they're not core? Yes, we have probably 25 special events between the street fair, Halloween, 4th of July, Christmas parade, all the different breakfast with Santa, all the stuff we're doing now, all would be in jeopardy of going. Police officers, we'd have to be as tight as possible. We don't want to jeopardize safety, but we would have to look at trimming how many total officers we have to get to they're such a big part of our budget. If we don't touch that budget, we won't even be able to function in the rest of our departments when they have 55% of our general fund. We can't ignore move 9 million, say, over to just the other departments because there isn't even enough money there to cover that. So we have to do something. So this was the plan back in June of reducing things. We talked about it, community development, looking at having to drastically cut code enforcement. So again, you call, hey, my neighbor's got an issue or something. Well, we're 2 months behind. We'll try to get there. Or even in the police officers with less officers to come for things like parking problems. You're trying to get out of your driveway in the morning. Hey, there's a car parked in front. I can't get out. Call a police department. Well, we're doing life and safety calls. We don't have the extra staff. So we'll try to get there later in the day or the next day. We're not spoiled in this city. I think we get the service we should get, but contemplating the alternatives with less service is very impactful, I believe. But again, we have to plan for it. So this is just a rough example of the plan in June. We'll get an update on this for June 13th next year. So we're looking at all options for revenue growth, not just focused on one item. If we looked at that street lighting landscape maintenance district that we highlighted that was not approved back in the day for a CPI increase, that could go back to the voter and say, could we add a CPI increase? We could do that. We think if we reset it, it might generate 1.5 million, 1.6 million per year if we kind of moved it up to current standards. But that's a whole exercise to educate and go out to the ballot and ask for that, which we can do, but it only gets us a tiny way towards a $9 million gap. And it's hard to, we could put two things on the ballot, say, if we did something else in that, but it's, what's going to solve the biggest problem in the short term. That's something called a utility users tax. And we'll show you a little more information about that in the next slides. This is something that I'll show you in a chart, but every city in our region has, and we have none. And it could be a major revenue generator. Let me just get back there. Transit occupancy tax, we collected our hotels. We have very few hotels and they're not big revenue generators. Our rate's a little low. We could bump it up, maybe a couple percent, maybe $150,000 more in revenue. But again, we'll look at that. We've already done adjustments on our fees, done a fee study, a general one to increase by basically CPI and a little bit more because we had a couple of years where we didn't raise our fees. So all our fees for permits went up, should generate a couple $100,000 per year. We are just finalizing a study on impact fees for new development for things like traffic fees, park and lieu fees, even public safety fees that we can get at the time of development and ask for a list of more contributions. They get put into buckets for those things. They're not general revenue, so they can't necessarily, pay for a police officer, but they could be there for parks projects over time. They could be there for transportation work around that development. So they're a little more specific, but most cities have more impact fees than we have. So if we wanted to get to more of the best practice, we'd look at that to generate some additional revenue. Trying to do what we can, more than we're already doing if we can for economic development. But as was mentioned, we have a new Chick-fil-A, which we're excited about, but a revenue, when you talk about how much of that sales tax comes to the city, remember it's the 2% on the taxable, which not all food products are taxable. Even if they're making millions of dollars, it's around a $90,000 per large busy restaurant, like an In-N-Out or a Chick-fil-A. So if we need 9 million, we need 100 Chick-fil-A's. So the scale's a little hard to reach, but we can look and we'll continue to look. And then our street sweeping fees, we're looking at options if we could increase those in some way to offset some of the subsidy our general fund's doing. So we are looking at a lot, but with that, if we're looking at a real ability to solve the growth, we want to look at other cities around us and say, hey, are we the only ones struggling? Or why are we struggling more than our neighbors? What are they doing that we're not doing? If you have a neighbor beside you with a brand new Mercedes and an RV and they've just, put in a hot tub and you're looking at them going, what are they doing I'm not doing? I'm not saying our surrounding neighbors are all living that large, but if they're not at this big of a structural deficit, are we just running our city poorly, or do we not have as much income as our neighbor? So this chart's hard to read, so we try to zoom in a bit. This is the first portion on the left of the chart. So these are the cities that are nearby that we highlight with their population, their general fund, how big their general fund is compared to ours. You'll see Southgate at the bottom in blue. And then you'll see what kind of police services they have. If it's local, like we have our own police department, a lot of cities have sheriff. And then fire services are a few of the larger cities, or some of the cities have their own fire department. Most have county. And then library services, almost all have the county like us. And then what's the total sales tax by city? And then you see how much property tax share each city gets, which is strange because somewhere like Linwood gets 11.3% of the sales tax and we get 6.15. That was set back in 1978. It's not right. It would be nice for us to get 11%, but it's frozen at that time. Some cities it makes sense because they're getting, like in Downey's case, they have well, not in Downey's case, but in cities, yes, Downey, they have both police and fire and library services. So getting parts of the property tax in cities like ours are going to fund county fire and county libraries. But in a city like Downey, if they're doing it themselves, getting more of that share to fund that makes sense. But in cities that are exactly like us with county library and county fire and a local police department or even sheriff, why do they get such a high percentage? We can't solve that, but it's just a testament that we are the lowest in the property tax of our surrounding cities. So moving down these charts even further, utility users tax. You'll see every city on this chart has a tax that ranges from 2% in Carson to 10% in Bell. And you'll see Southgate has 0. Some cities have a cannabis tax rate. If you have cannabis stores in your city, of which we do not have them, some cities add a tax and can generate revenue that way. Then local sales tax measures, we've added that extra 1%. The default is 1%. We've had a vote in 2008 to add 1. You'll see a range in other cities of percentages where they've done the full 1% or they've done some portion of it, either 0 or 0.5 or 0.75. Some cities are coming back to get those extra 0.75s and 0.5s in the near future, like next November, to try to help their budget woes. But we're essentially max. There might be a 0.25 that we could look at down the road, but it's not, it doesn't add up to anything near what we need for the gap. Looking at what does the total sales tax, local sales tax generate per city, we're at 14 million. And then you can see the neighboring cities, what they generate. Cannabis tax, of course, in millions, the cities that have it, we have 0. Utility users tax, you see everybody with a number there and nothing for our city. And then there's special assessments. Ours is the 2 million for the landscape tax, and other cities have different things there. And then some cities actually have a pension tax that was approved by their voters to generate funds specifically for covering the cost of pensions of the city. So those are all the different tools that are out there. You can see the comparison. There's a whole philosophical decision of if bringing cannabis stores with all maybe the benefits, but also the drawbacks is the direction the city wanted to do. That could have a tax help. Early cities that adopted this got a lot of tax revenue and it kind of created a gold rush. But, supply and demand has changed that over time. So just like, say the first Chick-fil-A in Southern California had 7-hour lineups. Once you get one on every corner, it waters down the impact. So that's happened in the cannabis industry where now that all the surrounding cities have them, you add more here, our amount we could generate would actually eat away at some of our neighbors' revenue. We'd still get revenue, but it's not a home run. It's not a $9 million solution by any means, but it could be looked at. So that's that. And then we also looked at a per capita. How much is these main tax drivers add up to? And some of these cities, of course, have a utility users tax in the millions of dollar range, and Southgate has none. So when you look at the revenue per person by our population, you have a column on the far right, and ours is one of the lowest on the list, right near the bottom. We've got Maywood at 538. You have us at 717 per person contributing tax to the city. And then you have like a Downey at 1,100 or a Gardenia at 1,400 or a Bell at 2,300 and then a Santa Fe Springs of $4,482,000 per resident. So there's quite a range there, but you can see we are way down at the lower end. So if we're trying to say, why aren't we able to keep up paying the expenses we have for our community of 95,000 people compared to our neighbors, we're generating less revenue. Our residents are actually paying less for the same services that our neighbors are paying. You want to use, if Downey's a comparable person, imagine if we received another $400 per resident. Instead of $700, we were getting $1,100. That's how we can visualize it. So with that difference, people will say Southgate's the highest tax place at all. That's completely wrong. These are the numbers. This is the truth. So a little more on the utility users tax, and then we'll land the plane. I appreciate your patience. A lot of stuff to take in, major decision, generational kind of decisions to talk about here. So appreciate your patience. Utility users tax. So we highlighted that as a major tax revenue for all the cities around us. If you live in a city other than Southgate, on your water bill, sewer bill, power bill, those utilities, even your cable bill, there'll be an extra tax line for utility users tax of whatever percent, ranges from like 2% to 10%. 100% of that money goes to the city. There's no sharing with the county or the state. And as an interesting quirk, we have a lot of property owners that are paying, there might be a case to be made that property owners, even if they're renting property, commercial, industrial, or residential, they're paying for all the city services. They may not live in town, but they're contributing on behalf of the resident in their place. They're paying the property tax share. The resident's not. The utility users tax, typically, it gets paid by whoever has the utilities in their name. So there is a more direct correlation that the resident that's local, it's here, would pay some share towards the services they use, and not necessarily the landlord if they happen to be offside. So it's just an interesting thought process. It doesn't really matter one way or the other, but it's a different way of thinking about who's contributing and using the services versus who's contributing and maybe not using the services. So what is utility users tax? It's a good eye chart here, but I think I can keep up. It's a local tax imposed on utility services that's provided to residents and businesses. It's to generate more revenue for essential city services, and it's a general tax, so it doesn't come connected directly to a certain support of a certain type of service. If it becomes a specific tax, if it's directed to just police or just parks or something, the bar to pass it at the electoral level is 2/3. If it's a general tax, the ability to pass it is 50% plus one. So these are typically done as general taxes. And then the benefit is to support all things general fund, which includes public safety, infrastructure, community services, enhance all the services that we've been talking about that might have to be cut. And so you get these, I've talked about already on your electricity, water, sewer, gas, cable, you get this extra charge, and it goes on the utility, and then 100% comes to the city. Here's a general calculation of looking at what different percentages might generate for city revenue. Apparently it seems to be a struggle. We've worked with a consultant, we've worked with a couple different cities and asked, and it's a little hard to get exact numbers, but we can get pretty accurate estimates of $9 million at 7%, 10.7 at 8%, 9%, 12 million, and so forth. So there's some estimate revenues connected to what percent we would set that. There'd be the ability for council to determine what percent to recommend this at. Again, looking at the revenues by city and compared to their population, Southgate, top left, 0. And then you look at all the millions of dollars being generated, different cities. A lot of this actually gets paid for by industrial and commercial centers that have large utility bills. So you look at Carson, $10 million, same population as us. They only have a 2% rate. They're projected to generate what we would have to charge, probably 8%. How can they do that with only 2%? They have refineries. Those refineries use huge amounts of utilities, so they pay the lion's share of that to the point where it adds up to that high. So that's a quirk in this whole system, but it is something to think about that the higher your utility bill is, the more you contribute. And then the rates, they vary all over the place. This is just another way to look at the rates that is a little easier to read than our eye chart table. And then we've got exemptions that could be added. Every exemption you add reduces the revenue. So the more things you take out, if you say maybe not on this utility or maybe this group gets excluded, we have to recalculate an estimate and say, well, if we need 9 million and we want to exclude all these people, now it only generates 6 million. So then the rate for everybody else probably has to go up. So it's a dialogue that's needed to have, but we need to understand exemptions can cause rates to need to go up. But most of our surrounding cities have a senior exemption of some sort. Could be low income senior as an example, where at 65 with a low income, they could be exempt from paying the utility users tax. Another idea was perhaps a 2 rates. You know, if you're a senior and you're going to a restaurant or to a movie, there's a reduced rate for senior, but they're still contributing something towards the service versus it being free. Different ideas, again, could be picked, but this is some of the flexibility in how you design this per city. And then, as I mentioned, it's a general tax, so it would go into the general fund to fund any type of service. In our case, we're not saying our budget's balanced and we have a big wish list of millions of dollars to add tons more services. We're just trying to keep the services we have with a little extra to do some small things. So we would fill in all those gaps that we're proposing in the budget list and keep those services. Here's a general, what would it cost me as a resident? We've done some calcs at different percentages. It really, everyone can do a calc. Take your utility bills, add say 7%, add 8%, add 9%. Everyone's utility bill is different, but as a ballpark, a low user, say it's 7%, around $26 a month. Medium user about $39 and a high user about $52 to compare on what it might be per household per year, per month, sorry. And then it would add up as a quantity per year. So that would add to the contribution when we talk about how much per taxpayer we're receiving now, and us being at the bottom of the chart. You add another, say, $400. We talk about Downey being at $1,100 per resident and us being about $700. That 7% contribution on, say, a low user would actually get us to the Downey level of contribution, which then you start thinking, well, then, we could keep up with a neighbor. So council, in the conversation we had at our last meeting, gave the okay to begin the communication process. This is what you see with me here. You'll see Louis and I returning to the Parks Commission next week. And then we're starting social media education. How much of our property tax comes to the city? How much of our sales tax? Those very same things in much simpler, shorter formats with a link to our website if someone wants to deep dive. But we want to get that word out because, I wouldn't have known this before I worked in city government. I'm not even, I'm my wife doesn't know this. Lots of people don't know it. It's okay not to know it, but we need to educate. And we're going to do, we have a dedicated UUT page with FAQs, with the presentations that we've done at the council recorded with links. We're going to have more budget conversations with community groups, whoever wants to hear them. We're going to have a mailer go out in the water bills, both English and Spanish, to give a one-pager summary with a QR code where you can add comments if there are, and kind of rank services you value. We're going to have a revamped survey go out. We haven't finalized it yet, but it's going to be retooled in more of an informational process to allow people to be educated on our budget shortfall, on things like a utility user tax, how they might work, and then again ask what services do they value the most. That'll be coming out on a random survey call out to people. And we're going to have as much public engagement as we can have and answer questions and meet with people so we can all be educated before big decisions have to be made. And then the concept is, here's social media on the colorful charts, and then the black and white on the right could be the mailer, something like that. That could go in the water bills. And then ballot language would have to be finalized by council. This is just, a general thought that's similar to other cities. It's for all sorts of things. It's not just one thing. This one proposes 7%, roughly what it might generate. So that's just an example of a ballot language that would show up when you go to the ballot. It would say that to help explain what it is. That's needed to be created and approved. And then if council wanted to go this way, and that's part of their discussion in January, would they like to do it? If they'd like to put it on a June ballot, which is the next regular scheduled election in the city, that's for the governor and for primaries, I believe. There's no council on that election. So in order to allow a revenue measure to go on an election that doesn't have a council member on it, you need to declare a fiscal emergency, which would need to be declared. That needs to be a unanimous vote of the council on the night of that meeting. So if you have 5 council members, they all have to say yes. They can't abstain. They can't say no, or you can't declare the fiscal emergency. Or if a council member is not there, 4-0 would work, or even 3-0, but you can't have it. They have to have a united vote of the people there. So that would have to be first, and then that would open up the ability for a June election, which would then have to be put on the ballot with a supermajority of 4 votes. So you could have a 4-1 there, but you can't have a 3-2, and that would allow it to be on the ballot in June. If that isn't able to be achieved, November, where a couple council members, our treasurer and clerk are on the ballot, we could put it on with just the supermajority without declaring a fiscal emergency. So that's the action steps there. Here's some general timelines. We're still nailing down the dates, but we're going to start the conversation in January. If we get direction to put this on a ballot, we'd plan to have a first reading and a second reading, and then place it on the June ballot, have the election, and then the community would be educated over that course of that time. If you don't want to vote for it, just know that these are the services that will be cut. And it'll be clear, the community will decide, not the council, not the staff. Community will decide cuts or, keeping those services. And then it's up to the community, and whatever they pick is, we'll have both budgets ready, because right at the end of June is when we do our budget for the next year. So we'll have to prep both, sort of the tough budget and the good one. And then if we can get it on June, that's sort of the ideal time to let the community choose the budget. If we can't do June, it's very complicated, because we don't have enough reserves to safely kick the can down another 6 months to November. So that would leave us having to do the bad budget with all the cuts, lay off people, close facilities, get rid of crossing guards, get rid of all our special events from July 1st onward, and create all that upheaval. And then September, people are like, where's my crossing guards, and where's my pool, and staff, where's my services, why is everything lined up? And then an election in November, say it passes. That's great, but now we have to rebuild. And we might say police officers are hard to get, but lifeguards are very hard to get. We're very fortunate. We have a good environment at our pool. We keep lifeguards, but if we were to close the pool for even 6 months, they all go. It's very hard to find people willing to work part-time shifts for, not too much above minimum wage that have all the certifications for lifeguarding. And so they'd be gone. Even if we got it passed in November, people like after Christmas break go, I voted for my pool. Where is it? We're going to be we've got 10% of the lifeguards. Maybe we can open 1 day a week, and we'll build over the next 6 months and hopefully get back to open, but it's going to look like we lied. School crossing guards, January 1st. Okay, I voted for my school crossing guard. Well, it's a contract. So if they found out July 1st they're canceled, I would imagine these school crossing guards are going to scramble to other places, get jobs at other schools, districts, other school areas, or retire, or just go find other jobs. And then we tell the contractor in November, oh, you're back. They're not going to be able to get 40 guards back in January. It'll have to build back, maybe till the next school year. But again, I'm a parent. I signed my ballot. Where's my school has no crossing guards. You guys lied. So I'm concerned about that model, because I really don't think the community's going to understand the complexity of that. I think us having to try to call back staff that have been laid off and then bring them back, they'll be somewhere else, or be, thank you very much, I don't want to be here. And then it's very hard in a lot of our positions to get qualified people. So that would be a worst case scenario. But again, it'll be up to council, and they have some big decisions to make in January to determine if this is something to put on a June ballot or not. With that, I've taken a lot of your time, and I appreciate the patience, but Lewis and I are here for any questions that you might have.
Thank you for this detailed presentation. For now, if we could open it up to the audience for any questions or comments. Please say your name and where you reside would be great.
Chengus Dominguez, resident of Southgate. I mean, this is just abysmal, pitiful. On page 7 of the handout of the presentation, there's one line that just really sticks out. To maintain the current level of services, the city needs an influx of approximately $10 million annually to bridge the gap. Well, that right there is the bullseye. That says it all right there. $10 million. How the hell is our city going to come up with $10 million with all these shortages? And then you jump to page 17, where the city manager goes through all the various charts, this service and tax survey. He just laid out how wretched our city council members are. This takes years of neglect. This just doesn't happen overnight. They could have done something to move the needle forward in getting some of these fees and increases with the street and landscaping. They haven't done anything. Nothing. This is decades of neglect here. And he just highlighted perfectly in his presentation how pitiful our city leaders are in making sure that our city is fiscally sound. If our council members manage their personal finances the way they do our city funds, they'd be broke. They wouldn't have any money. They would be in a I don't know what type of deficit, how big a hole they'd be in to try to crawl out of. So we're right now, what is it, a $9 $1 million financial hole that we got to figure out how to crawl out of. With this utility users tax, it says again, approximately 10 million annually to bridge the gap. So going forward, we're going to, with the utility users tax, we're going to need 10 million just to break even. Is that right? Just 10 million to break even and not?
Probably 9 million is accurate for right now.
Yeah. Yeah, 9 million just to break even. That's not even making any potential gains. So here's the thing that I want to say about the utility users tax. There's just three things I want to see get done. One, pay our bills. Two, grow the general fund. And three, take on big projects. And if we're going to be using the bulk of the money just to break even, I don't see how these three things are going to be able to be accomplished. And the problem that I have also is I don't trust our city council members. I don't trust them with money. This right here, the neglect, and also the stab to the heart to me is they had $34 million in ARPA funds. They in one of the presentations, Frausto said that they allocated $4 million. I remember $6 million from one of Jeffers' presentations, but I'll go with Frausto. $4 million for an abandoned city-owned building, which is the courthouse. And what did they do? They reappropriated the $4 million to pay for other projects that they didn't have a sufficient amount of revenue to pay the cost for. So right there, that right there is an example of what I mean by a rip-off project. We never got our courthouse renovated. I'm not sure if it was supposed to be for plans and designs and the renovation or just the plans and designs itself. But right there, they ripped us off with that. And then what became of the 30 million, the remaining 30 million? What can they point to with that 30 million and say, we did this, we funded this with the $30 million in ARPA funds because the residents asked for it, demanded it, wanted it, here it is, we delivered. So what are we going to get out of this utility users tax? What benefit is it going to be for the residents in terms of items on the agenda? Like when is that stuff going to appear on the agenda? Last city council agenda was a very ambitious agenda, and tremendous that they got those projects done. But where's our stuff? When is our stuff going to be on there? That's what I want to see. I want to see the things that the residents want to see for their city. They're giving the city what it needs. Well, how about giving the residents what they want and what they would like to see for our city? I'll end with that.
Thank you. So just to do, solo para hacer para trasladar lo que dijo el señor Domínguez, dice que en la página 17 mencionan que hay 10 millones de dólares de defección solo para continuar los servicios que existen en la ciudad, y dice que no confía en el concilio para adecuadamente dirigir el dinero que van a recibir con el tax que está propuesto. Y de ejemplo da el dinero que se supuso que se hubo para arreglar el edificio de corte, pero al fin no utilizaron ese dinero para arreglarlo. That's all.
Good evening, Planning Commission, City staff, Edgar Pelayo, Madison Avenue. Want to thank the city manager and staff for going on this presentation tour, so to speak, with all the commissions. I think that's important. I think it's also important to include it with the community. Maybe have something like a coffee with the cop, but instead have something like that. And I think that you mentioned last council meeting about a Did You Know campaign. Maybe we need to let the community know that they're we're having these presentations, and at the same time offer the translation services, considering that a lot of our community is Spanish language speakers. So I mean, I would think that the goal overall to get people here so that they're educated and they're informed on what's at stake here. So I'd like to sort of touch on this by saying that, I think like, in our home, for example, if we're looking for a roof repair in the next 5 years, we need to start making decisions now, right? And I think that forecasting and resource allocation is really where we would be able to plan for this kind of thing. So it definitely helps to be ahead of the game and know what's coming down the line so we can make those adjustments. I just feel that the city staff and council members have been reactive rather than being proactive in looking at some of these things. So, for example, the World Cup is coming next year. The Olympics will be here in a couple of years. The transient occupancy tax, right? We don't have very many hotels, but we do have Airbnbs. And that's an opportunity to have tax there from people visiting from other countries and other areas. So we can definitely generate some money there. Now, is it going to be 10 million? No, but it's going to be something that's going to go into the pot. So I think that's going to be something that's important. Also, with regards to you mentioned that general liability has gone up, and those costs have been sort of uncontrollable. I'd like to ask, with regards to some of the lawsuits that have gone throughout the city, how much of that has contributed to the actual general liability going up significantly? We've talked about raises for employees, and I think that if the work is getting done, no problem. I think that everyone deserves to get a raise if the work is getting done. But there seems to be a disconnect within the community and city staff and council where things are supposedly getting done, but we just don't see it out in the community. And I hear that from a lot of the residents. So I'd like to see what a raise for the community looks like. If the community were to get a raise, what does that look like? That's part of it. So I have some suggestions for possible solutions. Since this is a planning commission, as a broker, a real estate broker that does business here in Southgate, most of the properties that get sold in Southgate have a pre-sale inspection report. And in those reports, I would say that 80% of them have unpermitted additions or repairs. What if there's some sort of amnesty, like an unpermitted, window replacement? We'll waive the fee, pay your permit. That'll bring the value up. Maybe it'll broaden our tax base, and that'll generate a little bit more for the buckets that we have that we've been speaking about. Few other things, parking. A lot of we've compared ourselves to some of the cities that are surrounding us. A lot of the cities around us have no overnight parking, and there's permit costs that people have to pay. We can implement something like that, generate a little more from there. We have a lot of lots along Tweedy Boulevard by the alleyways that are basically empty throughout the night. Maybe we can have paid parking there for some of the overflow. So those are some of the things that I think we need to maybe focus on. What I'm trying to say is thinking outside the box. Lastly, we spoke about crossing guards, and I think that it's important to have that kind of feature or benefit here in the city. But the question that I'd like to ask is, whose responsibility is that? Is that the city's responsibility? Is that the district's responsibility? Or is it the parents, right? I think that maybe we can generate a group that's made out of volunteers or parents that perhaps can help with that and help lessen that impact. So those are just some of the things that I wanted to bring up. I appreciate this presentation, and I hope that this is ongoing and not just an education for residents, since we're considering a utility users tax. Thank you.
Thank you. Para dar un resumen rápido, el señor Pelayo está agradecido por la presentación. Sugiere que hagan una campaña y hagan presentaciones para la comunidad en español para informar a los residentes, porque por la mayor parte hablan en español, y sugiere que el concilio sea, en vez de ser reaccionario, sea más prevenidos, y también da sugerencias de cómo traer más dinero con el World Cup que va a venir, también con las inspecciones residenciales de venta, y también vendiendo permisos para parking, y también da sugerencias sobre los guardias que trabajan para las escuelas para cruzar. Any other speakers? ¿Alguien más desea hablar? No? O preguntas? All right. With my colleagues, any other questions or comments?
I just wanted to thank staff for the presentation. Great presentation. Thank you. It was very informational. I also kind of piggyback off of what was just mentioned about the budget workshops. I also suggest that we do have these in Spanish, bilingual, not just the presentation itself, but also maybe Q&A, be able to answer some of the questions that are being asked in Spanish. I do have a question regarding how the city is currently measuring the effectiveness of our spending.
Is there any particular areas or just overall?
Just overall.
Yeah, I mean, appreciate the conversation. Each area has its own uniqueness. For instance, if you look at police services, people say run government like a business, but how do you charge people the actual costs of police services, right? Like you have to make a 911 call and that's going to come with a $25,000 bill if 4 vehicles are there for 3 hours and fire comes and you have to pay for that service. No one's going to ever hit 911, right? So there's sort of an assumption that that's a general cost that's covered. The fact that we have detectives, we have our 911 dispatchers, we have narcotics people, we have all these different records, non-sworn people, all that group. How do you charge for that? So that tends to be a thing like a general tax. So are we look at crime stats, we look at not sort of dollars per result, like in a private business, you might say, many years ago as a McDonald's manager, so we would actually look at sales per hour compared to labor cost per hour. We'd be looking at our efficiencies there. And if our sales were dropping that hour, you're sending a couple people home so that you can keep your ratios. That model here doesn't work. So we look at, say, for police, crime stats, response times for 911 calls. We try not to look so much at the revenue side of how many tickets do we issue, but we do look at effectiveness. Say if we do have a problem, like usually at the beginning of every school year, we look at what's the traffic like at the schools. We increase enforcement if we see that it's, we're getting complaints of chaos. We come, we ticket, we educate, we see a reduction so we can see solutions there. When we have major crimes, we look at, can we successfully track down the perpetrators? We look at success rates there. When you move over to something like parks and recreation, again, private business would be, we got to recoup our costs. We have, this pool is expensive to operate, so let's divide the cost times the users. It's probably something like $150 a swim. Is the community, does that work? So parks and rec services are all subsidized. And that happens at every community where the general tax is subsidizing the user's tax. So the efficiencies there are more, can we keep everything staffed enough to keep the pool open? So we're always trying to stay ahead of the hiring game because you got a lot of part-time kids that, we're all going to college next year. Goodbye. So we have to be proactive and, we're kind of measured at, do we keep the actual services going? Do we, make sure the watering systems and the fertilizer and the grass is working so the baseball diamonds don't have to be closed to repair? Those are some examples of how we're successful. When we look at our public works folks, traffic signals, if they're down, how soon can we get out there to get them back up? We're having a huge problem with wire theft that's hitting us everywhere. It's just hit Sam's Club a couple days ago on their roof. Hundreds of thousands of dollars in costs, and they cause streetlights to be out, traffic signals. So we're doing what we can, but to be successful, it costs more money nowadays than it used to be to keep that successful. But we look at that, but even we look at struggles, gaps in our city where, say, Tweedy, for years, decayed, we weren't looking successful, but at millions of dollars to repair it, how could we be successful? A 10-year journey, taking years of staff time working with different agencies to put together multiple grants to get a $9.5 million pot of money, none of it from our general fund, none of it from our taxpayers, to fund that entire project and manage it. So that's success. but it's hard to measure in time or response. So there's a nuance in every area of our department. In our finance department, are we getting payroll paid on time? Are we getting our bills paid without late fee penalties? Are we passing audits? You know, what findings are there? Are they major findings? Are they minor? That's success there. HR, how fast are we getting good candidates to the departments to backfill their vacancies? Are we providing good training, testing that goes on with the police force? Are we doing that in a timely way? Are we advertising correctly? So each department has its own unique way, and I can't leave, of course, planning out and building. You know, can we get people their building inspection in a fast time so they're not holding up their projects? What's our turnaround time and development? We're trying to improve that. We actually did a presentation at the last council meeting to show how we're merging the public works, building and planning teams to work together better to have that turnaround time improved. But that would be an example of how do we see success. And then in our housing program, funded from federal funds, we have a whole different program. We have measures that come from the federal government with that funding to get people Section 8 housing and to inspect their units. And so each, unlike a normal company, we're in so many wide-ranging pies that each place has its own uniqueness. But and a big indicator is how many complaints are we getting from the community, you know, the customer. And so we do try to jump and triage if we're seeing a uptrend in some area, but we do have 95,000 customers. And, you know, if we actually look at a percentage of complaints versus not complaining, I'd say we're being very successful for the resources we have. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, that pretty much
Let me
answers in a nutshell, yeah.
deje trasladar. Mi colega preguntó cómo se mide la eficaz en el uso de los fondos y el manager Houston dijo que es difícil por muchos servicios que proveen como los servicios de la policía, porque uno no quieren que no hable la gente a la policía si les van a hacer cobro de los servicios por cada carro o cada policía o cada investigador que vaya al asistir a los incidentes. Entonces, también como los servicios del parque, como en la alberca, si se hace la cuenta por usuario, puede salir como a $700 por cada persona que vaya a nadar. So, esas cosas no sería justificado cobrar por cada servicio, entonces ese tipo de servicio se tiene que dividir por todos los residentes. Pero lo que sí pueden hacer es medir las quejas, asegurarse que los servicios sean que sean mejorados y también que cosas como las inspecciones o los permisos sean que crean más eficaz, y eso también fue un ejemplo que hicieron o una plática que hicieron, una presentación que hicieron en la última junta del concilio. Estuvieron hablando sobre cómo el departamento de how do you say community development, desarrollo, sea más, pueda ser más tener más eficiencia trabajando con otros departamentos y también dando más información al público. That covers everything.
Another question I have, Rob, is which departments are currently, or programs are currently seeing the biggest cuts? I know there's significant reduction on page 15 and, what is it, 14 and 15, but are there any specific departments that are probably seeing the biggest cuts?
Again, that's in process, and we'll have the final list for the January 13th council meeting. But when we look at a $9 million number, we look at, I don't have an easy way to go back on the slide, but we don't need to do that. 55% of our general fund is police. So if you look at a 4.2% million cut from their budget. We don't see that we could be viable for protecting the community at a high enough rate. So the numbers they're looking at might be sort of half of that. So that pushes a very concentrated number onto the remaining 45% of our general fund area. So instead of everyone taking 12, a 15% cut, you now have the police taking maybe 8, and then you talk about Parks and Rec, you talk about our Public Works Department, you talk about our finance, our community development, taking a 25 to 30% cut. It's going to be pretty brutal. We haven't worked out the details there, but it's, we can't, there's going to be limits to what we can do on the police side, which creates a big problem on the other side, but we'll have more details in another month.
Okay, thank you.
Mi colega preguntó qué departamentos van a tener los más recortes y el señor Houston dijo que esa decisión todavía está en proceso, pero dijo que todos los departamentos no pueden tener el mismo recorte. Que dio el ejemplo de la policía, aunque ellos tienen la más mayor parte de los gastos, como proveen servicios importantes, es probable que tengan menos recortes y los otros departamentos van a tener una más grande porcentaje. Any other questions?
I do. And it's more for clarity for myself as I'm learning this as well. I appreciate the presentation. It's very eye-opener. One thing, I know that you have mentioned here about the structural deficit. And there's like an increase caused driven by pension and all that. But is there a major examples that are also driving this deficit that I probably missed somewhere in there?
Yeah, I think if you've got the slide deck in, it's, I don't know what page number, but the slide number, page 9, slide 17, summary of key cost increases. I'd say that be the highlight ones that we showed, the unfunded pension liability, the health insurance, the general liability, and the street lighting and landscape district. Is that's really the
major one.
Yeah, the ones that are ramping up at a much higher rate than, say, our revenue. That'd be a highlight. We also, have other contracts that maybe don't fit there where, if you've tried to get, if we have a contract to do, say, repairs for air conditioning and, pre-COVID, that price was a certain amount and then it's expanded by 30% for those type of things. We have those same problems because we're getting that same contractor to work for us that you're having work at your house. And it's much higher than like 3% a year.
Thanks. And then the second part, as an example, and again, this is again for my understanding, because I think a lot of other residents may think this way too, is you talked about getting sales tax from like big companies, let's say Chick-fil-A. Is Amazon in that same group or not? Like, do we see anything?
So yeah, Amazon's an interesting customer, and I probably defer to Lewis for the specifics, but generally the Amazon building we have in town, it transfers products. Of course, many of them come from overseas. They land in Long Beach. A lot of them trek up to, say, Riverside to a very huge processing center. And then there's ones that then come back down to sit in our processing center, which is not the same. It's not a warehouse. It actually fills up overnight. And then during the course of the day, it completely empties. So it doesn't get registered as a point of sale for generating sales tax like a big warehouse, say, in Riverside does. So it's a quirk in sales tax and I think unfair, but we don't get taxed directly from revenue. But if the products are delivered in town, purchased here when you go to purchase and there is sales tax, we can get a percentage of that. But I'm going to defer over to Lewis if he knows more about the specifics of how the two sales tax work on that. Do you know that offhand?
Yeah, so we actually get very little sales tax from Amazon. So they're not even registering in our top 100. And that's because of the nature of how that's structured. It's where the sale, the whole logistics network of Amazon, right? It just depends on where the sale occurs and where they're they're registering that transaction. But yeah, Amazon is not in our top 100.
But to clarify, it's
Yeah.
very complicated. So the state collects all that sales tax, and then they do their own calculation. They give a pool of all the sales tax in proportion to different cities. We have a pool number. I don't know what it is. So that incorporates any online deliveries, including Amazon. So we don't get an Amazon number. So the actual company doesn't show up as top 100. There is revenue that comes from this, but it's not like a Costco, because all the purchases made there are registered in the town they're in. And then you get, say, if you have a 2% that goes to your city, you get 2% of, $100 million. That could be $2 million a year. But I'm sure there's hundreds of millions of dollars flowing through our Amazon center all year, and it doesn't register the same way. So it's disappointing.
Thank you.
So
And I'm sorry, Chairman Roos, for how long my answers are, knowing you have to translate.
I know, it's not easy. So, mi colega preguntó sobre qué otros ejemplos contribuyen a la defección y dijo que el señor Houston dijo que por la mayor parte todo está aquí incluido en la presentación, empezando por la página 17, creo que dijo. Pero sí dijo que otras cosas que quizás no son muy evidentes son como costos de cosas que tienen que ser arregladas por no arreglándolos pronto y termina que suban los costos cada año, como el aire acondicionado que pudo ser mucho más barato si lo hubieran arreglado muchos años antes y ahora por el costo puede ser duplicado. También preguntó sobre otras corporaciones, otras fábricas o compañías que cuánto contribuyen en taxes y, por ejemplo, Amazon, que tienen un centro de distribución aquí en nuestra ciudad, pero ellos respondieron que es muy difícil calcular el dinero que obtienen por esa compañía, porque aunque muchos artículos van por esa propiedad, solo pueden cobrar tax por lo que se ordena aquí en la ciudad y lo que se envía aquí en la ciudad. Y también el Estado es la entidad que decide cuánto dinero proporcionar por cada ciudad. El cobro no es directo por Amazon, es por el Estado.
And I do want to add, because I just pulled up the report, and so our allocation for Amazon is significant. It's just the way we receive it is some quirky way, but we are receiving a good amount of revenue from them. But a good amount, it's about $7 million roughly, but I can't get too specific in the number.
But again, it's a fraction of what would be if the actual dollars were calculated like a Walmart or a Costco, where you get the full value of the figure. But it is revenue that we get. But that would come whether we had a warehouse in our city or not. So we could have it sit somewhere else without the impact as much, but the trucks still drive down our streets no matter what, but we do get revenue.
So, clarificó el señor Luis que ahorita se fijó en el reporte y recibimos 7 millones de Amazon, pero el señor Houston dijo que clarificó que ese dinero no proporciona el costo que tenemos nosotros como residentes de tener ese centro de distribución en nuestra ciudad. O sea, todo el tráfico por las trocas y todo eso que vienen de aquí de la propiedad. Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a few questions here. I guess maybe, well, first of all, I think thanks for the presentation. I know we've been through it a couple of times. Yeah. And, I think one of the things that we often kind of come across is that, a lot of our residents are not as civically engaged as we'd like them to be. So sometimes when we get into a presentation, uh, it goes back to, well, how did we get here, right? And like the background behind it, and some of the residents kind of touched on, what decisions could have been made. Well, not everyone here was here when those decisions were made, 3-4 years ago. But it is interesting to kind of see, like, Louis, as you kind of came on board, looking at, I'm assuming probably the first thing you had to do is kind of look at your historical kind of analysis, financial analysis of the entity, right? The city, and say,
Right.
hey, how long have we been in this type of deficit? Everybody's quick to say structured deficit. At the end of the day, it's still a deficit, right? How long have we been tapping into reserves in order to balance the budget for the city?
Well, a couple of things with that. I think if you look at a longer term history, like, 10 plus years, this is not the first time that the city has encountered fiscal issues. As a matter of fact, a couple of times in the last decade, maybe 2 decades. But in the last 5 years, it's been at least 3 years of which where additional money that's come in has offset our costs. So without that one-time money, we would have had, I think, a clearer deficit in prior years.
That's the ARPA funding, right?
Right.
Um,
Oh, you go. Do you want to translate that first?
oh, sorry, that's right.
I'll expand.
So-
Sorry, Liz.
Mi colega Jamie preguntó que, o dio el comentario de muchos residentes no son tan activos aquí en la ciudad. Muchos no estuvimos presentes cuando las decisiones fiscales fueron tomadas hace 3 o 4 años. Y pregunta que qué tanto tiempo hemos tomado dinero de los fondos de la cuenta de reserva que tenemos. Y respondieron que hace como 3 años que han tenido que tomar dinero para equilibrar how do you say budget? Los presupuestos.
Yeah,
Sorry.
could I add
Rob.
just a little more to that? So I think to your general point, the city hasn't recklessly spent, if it's like, well, where did all the money go? Well, there wasn't enough money. And so what happened, there was discussions I've found in the past historical documents about UUT. Hey, we could maybe do this. But I've been in many cities. Nobody wants to be the council that's taxing the residents, right? There's cities that their water fund is way below what the cost of the water is, because if you say, I want to raise the water rates and you got a full chamber all angry at you, then you back off. And so you just resist revenue. And our sewer rates were way below. And a year and a half ago, the council decided to reset them and cover the cost. But until then, it was almost $1 million a year of debt of subsidy going to cover that cost, like the Lighting Landscape District. So this is not strange at other cities too. There's a hesitancy. We know we need to ask for more money, but who wants to do that? Nobody wants to do that. So how did it balance? A lot of times positions were dragged and left vacant. So if you're not paying for their salaries, you're saving money. Our police department back in the day, I think 20 years ago, I don't have the exact figure, had 95 sworn positions for officers. The number that's been there for the last, I think probably since 2008, when there was the big budget cut, they dropped it to 86. And that became the new standard, which is way less than before. And the cities run below 86 until since then, as low as in the high 60s and then in the low 70s. So every officer position's saving, 150,000 or more with all the benefits. So there you go. You don't have 10 officers. There's $1.5 million that's, instead of being brought from the reserves, is getting filled by not having the service, which then results in worse service out in the community, can result sometimes in staff burnout, which can result in turnover, which can result in more overtime. It's a short-term fix. It's like the buckets in the building. Why is our roof so bad that we've got the buckets? Because we didn't have the money. We don't want to ask the community. It's human nature, it's tough to ask. So we'll just try to move the buckets around. We'll try to bring in some temporary air conditioning because it's expensive in the long run, but it's less than asking for that money. So deferred maintenance, not hiring people has been the way to avoid going into reserves. And then every city I know, ARPA money was extra. So it kind of kicked the can down for 4 years of, okay, we can keep the lights on until it all comes back to roost. And here we are now. And this conversation is having in cities across California. We are not alone. You will see, there was over 125 revenue measures last November in this state of California. And I wouldn't be surprised if more than that is the number coming next November. It's the ARPA money's disappeared, and everyone who's been kicking the can down the road is having to address it one way or the other.
El señor Houston añadió que sí, esta discusión sobre el tax de utilidades ya se ha hecho en el concilio, pero como han dicho mucha gente en estos tiempos, nadie quiere pagar otro tax. So no se ha hecho nada en ese respecto, pero lo que sí han hecho es no llenar posiciones. No han contratado para llenar posiciones que han sido vacadas, como los policías. Ya antes teníamos más y en un tiempo se reducieron la cantidad de policías que tenemos en la ciudad a 86, pero desde ese entonces hemos tenido mucho menos, como de 60 a los 70. Y lo que pasa es que se empeoran los servicios, y no solo en los policías, pero en otros departamentos cuando se han ido los trabajadores, que mucha gente, los trabajadores que se quedan, se terminan cansando por tener más trabajo. Y muchos de esos trabajadores se terminan yendo a otras ciudades. Ese tipo de solución muchas veces empeora la situación de la ciudad, como dijo antes, los servicios, la satisfacción de los servicios de los residentes. Y también mencionó fondos del gobierno federal, como los ARPA, que nos beneficiaron durante el tiempo de COVID, que llenó el déficit financiero, pero ya no lo tenemos disponible. Eso es lo que nos puso en este problema que tenemos ahora. Y mencionó también que Southgate no es la única ciudad que tiene estos problemas financieros.
Yeah, I was gonna add to that. When you look at, you mentioned that since 2020 we've had, maybe at that point we started tapping into reserves, or we haven't been as stable as we'd like to be. I think one of your previous leadership city managers referenced that went back to 2016, that there was already challenges with the financial status of the city, and that difficult decisions need to be made. But it makes sense, Rob. No one wants to tax the residents, right? Anybody, I'm sure council members are reluctant to go there until they feel like there's no choice. When you look at some of I was looking at your document. This is neat because I know you guys have gone through this before, but I don't think it's been posted anywhere. It has it? If so, I haven't been able to find it.
Yeah, we'll try to maybe find a more prominent button, but there is a UT or a budget page for this stuff that has the presentation, but we'll update it with this latest one because we keep refining and trying to be clear where we can.
It's a living document, so that's neat because I saw some new pages here, and I was going to ask you, I guess, as you look at maybe some of our neighboring cities, right, that have the UUT tax, how have they, which one would be a comparative kind of city based off of like the city makeup, same type of industry, and the number of residents in that city? What would be the closest one based off of the analysis you guys have made thus far?
I don't think there's a perfect match. I think Downey's size-wise and being nearby, but they do have other services like fire and library. But they're similar in size. And then we do have, what's the other city that's similar in size that I saw there? I'd have to look, but yeah, I mean, we certainly, we have these different ones.
Would it be like a Whittier?
Could be a Whittier. Part of what we have to look at too is, the ratios of looking at like cities, because like even talking about police officers, probably an average that is looked at as an ideal is 1 officer per 1,000 per community. And so you can have a city where our new max that we're temporarily having in based on the cuts we did last July is instead of 86, dropped to 81 as our target. Whether we can keep it 81 or have to go lower than that if we talk about permanent cuts. But then if you look at, say, if you use 81 to 95,000, we're below 1 per 1,000. We're at 0.9, but you might look at a Whittier and we'd have to see what's their number. If they're at like 1.3, then their total officer cost is higher. So it's hard to do apples to oranges. Like, what is the level of service? Some cities will have, higher levels of service. Some have lower. So it is hard to find the perfect match.
Yeah, the only reason I mentioned that is, sorry, translation.
Mi colega pregunta que, o mencionó que en el concilio, alguien en el concilio había mencionado que desde el año 2016 hemos tenido problemas financieros, y que sí es cierto que nadie quiere tax, pero que hasta que no hay una otra opción es cuando esta opción tiene que ser considerada. Y también pregunta que dónde va a estar disponible esta presentación, aunque es algo que puede cambiar de día en día. Tiene que ser más accesible. También pregunta que cuál de las ciudades de nuestros vecinos puede ser comparada con la de nosotros, pregunta si es basada en la cantidad de personas. Y el señor Houston dijo que quizás Downey o Whittier, pero que es muy difícil comparar porque también depende del tipo de nivel de servicios que queremos como ciudad. Y dio ejemplo la cantidad de policías, aunque antes nosotros queríamos tener 86 policías por cada 1,000 personas, han decidido en tener 81 policías por cada 1,000 personas. So, reduciendo esa cantidad tiene una grande reducción de gastos de fondos.
The only reason I was mentioning that is because I was, I just want to be mindful of everybody's time. But, when I'm looking at the percentage, right, potential UUT rates that we're considering, even if you look at like a Whittier or a Downey at 5% and what it would bring in, it's still kind of shy of what we need, right? Given that we're looking at a $9.4 million deficit, roughly 9 for this year, probably go up next year. Say if we do something closer to, I think you proposed like a $9 million UUT tax that get us closer to 12. What is that?
Well, the percentage at 7%, we look at it being about 9, and then if it was say 10%, like 9%, it would be into the, I think around 11 million or something. There's certainly, we look at that. We did the estimates we have. We don't have individual utility bills. We have water bills because we do the water. So we have a total water bill rate. We can multiply it by different percentages to see it. We were able to get from the gas company the total Southgate gas bill, total, not individual, and then the total electrical. So that gave us the big numbers. Cable, we don't have. Cell plans can be used. There's little things, but we don't have that. So we're using that as an estimate. But that's how we got these numbers. And yes, a higher percentage could give more clearance. It would just be a question, again, of council's decision of what to put on the ballot.
Do you look at, can you actually, this is actually a really good question. Can you provide a little clarity on what would be taxed? So we were talking, gas, water, what would that?
Yeah,
Laundry list be?
we have
Is
the
it on
list
there?
on a
Maybe I
slide.
missed it, I'm sorry.
It should be, I don't know what. I don't-
Oh, here we go.
Yeah, there it is.
Sorry, what page was that? If it's
30
in there, I can look at it.
Page 19, slide 37, services like electricity,
Okay.
water, sewer, gas, cable. are
Does
the
that include
typical
like
group.
mobile,
It can,
Yes.
right?
it
does,
can be,
right?
yeah, that, again, that could be included. That adds extra revenue, but extra cost. And so that's part of a decision that council makes of how expansive to be on the utility footprint.
The mobile.
Cell phones.
Cell phone, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the reason I mention that is because if you look at, say, the 9%, right, or 8 or 7 gets us right where we need to be, right, to cover or offset the deficit that we have. Say we do 9, that gets us to 12. I think one of the things that just keeps coming up as I'm just having conversations with folks is, you know, how do we, it doesn't appear to be a long-term solution because you bring in, say, we just go with 9, right? We're at a $12 million that brings in, right? And just to keep it simple, right? We have $9 million that comes in, and then we have a $3 million variance, right, from year to year, right? So that offsets. So you have $3 million to work with. Next year, we know uncontrollable costs are going to go up about $1 million, $2 million based off of what we're seeing. And then clearly we've seen an increase in staff costs, everything. So technically, we're going to find ourselves in this kind of predicament within 2 to 3 years. No,
Give
Greg,
me- give me a
you're
second.
jumping in, or maybe am I missing something? Greg's
También-
shaking his head. So good. Say, don't give me a heart attack.
Se está
Translation.
preguntando que, o está mencionando que todavía se le hace muy poco, que porque comparando los porcentajes que dieron en la presentación y el dinero que van a obtener por el presupuesto, la cantidad estimada no se le hace demasiado. Preguntó que qué utilidades van a tener el presupuesto y mencionó que están mencionadas en la página 19 y todavía no han decidido si va a incluir un tax en los teléfonos celulares. A mi colega le parece que no es una solución que pueda servir a largo plazo.
Sorry, you're going to add.
No problem.
Sorry. This
Yeah.
is perfect.
Okay. Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, we're not standing around as staff waiting for the UT to come solve everything for the long term. We're here spending tons of time. Each department has their budget cut list, but at the same time, they're looking to find permanent solutions. We've already did that last fiscal year with some creative ways of looking at what our crews do and can they do, say, more work in our different funds other than general fund in order to reduce the footprint. Public Works has already saved about $400,000, like finding solutions like that. Credit card fees used to be swallowed by the city. We've bumped them out to the user like most cities do. That's creating savings, increasing our fees and permits. We did a temporary bump, but we're doing a holistic review to get them to more market rates, which could generate more revenue. So we have other pieces to keep and impact fees. As I mentioned, a survey, we just approved a consultant at the last meeting to analyze the potential of anything that might be cheaper to outsource, but actually we're thinking there might be opportunities to insource a few services. We want to be relentless in finding any better way of doing it, looking at some of the services maybe that we've done for a long time. There's even a mention of a pre-sale, like we dedicate like staff to do all those pre-sale inspections. Is that something that not every city does that? If that was something that we dropped and when decisions were made, we could save, costs, but it's a feature we have, so we're going to look at everything. So I'm confident we can keep finding alternatives to keep as tight as possible. But yes, things could blow up, but I could say, I don't want to make it too hard to translate, but if you want to go in the weeds, cities were struggling with financing many years back, and they created something called redevelopment agencies. And that gave you new creative tools where if a city could get a new business in, they could keep a boost in property tax of that property. Like say it's used by a garage, it's worth $2 million, but you convert that property to like a car dealership, that's worth $20 million, that rise in property tax, instead of just the 6%, the cities could keep a way higher percentage of that because they're trying to redevelop and move up. That was a huge renovator generator for cities all through California, including here. The state wanted more of that money. They took it all away. So all cities lost all that revenue, not just us. And so all cities are struggling because the model is not working. The retail is leaving. It's going online. There's this inflation that's going much higher than rates. So we're not alone. So right now we're sort of in the bottom 30 of most, kind of toughest positioned cities in the state. So we're near the brink. If we could fill that gap and get to above even a bit, we now move to maybe 150th of the 400 cities, whereas the state was going to have to figure something else out, because if this model continues at this rate, we have cities around us that have a 10% like utility users rate, and they're on the brink. They don't have another bullet in that gun. What are they going to do? They're going to go over an edge in the next couple of years. I don't know what they can do. There's lots of cities that are going to be at the front. And if enough cities are going off that edge, there's going to have to be some kind of new creative way. Is there some kind of state allowance to add a parcel tax, or to give more percentage, say, of those online sales revenue to cities, or some new equation? I think it'll be a statewide solution that'll have to save all the sinking boats. We're not alone. But right now, we're right at the front. If we can get ourselves back, I think if it does get to the point where we're underwater again, everybody's underwater, and we're going to have to get a better solution statewide.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's great. Sorry, this is my last. After this, I'll give my last comment, and then I'll be done.
So, el señor Houston contestó que cada departamento está tomando cortes y están viendo si los trabajadores pueden tener o hacer más proveer más servicios, hacer más otro tipo de trabajo. Y también han cobrado las transacciones de las tarjetas de crédito, algo que otras ciudades ya habían hecho. También están viendo sobre las inspecciones, y mencionó que un problema o algo que añadió al dinero que no hemos podido agarrar es que los desarrollos de las propiedades, anteriormente nuevos negocios que se habían desarrollado propiedades, cuando subió el valor de las propiedades, las ciudades antes podían tener acceso a una más grande proporción de los taxes, pero desafortunadamente el Estado cambió esa ley y tomó esa porción del tax. Eso ha contribuido al pérdida de dinero, pero dice que el señor Houston dijo que otras ciudades que ya tienen el tax de utilidades se ven en problemas financieros, y piensa que por esa razón de ese tax de desarrollo de las propiedades, que quizás en ese, como ya tantas ciudades que tengan un problema financiero, en ese punto el gobierno estatal va a tener que hacer algo para todas las ciudades, porque no van a poder dejar que todas las ciudades se arruinan.
Yeah. And I'll just end with this is my last comment is, it's great to see that the staff are kind of living and breathing this. It is not an ideal situation to kind of find ourselves in as a city. But the key to everything is that the more informed that we are, hopefully we can rally up support for something if folks truly see that this is, a fiscal emergency, right? And I think sometimes perception is reality. And when folks might not be as engaged as we've noticed, right, in what's developing in our city financially, and they ask if it's a fiscal emergency. We've had 54 vacancies that we're still, maybe it's not a long-term solution, but maybe we need to look at maybe not filling that with a person that then we have to furlough in the future. Maybe we need to look at, for the betterment of our community, look at how we can maybe cap certain aspects of fringe benefits, or, look at, capping salaries in initial kind of short-term solution. But the long-term play is how can we continue to sustain the increase in costs that, are uncontrollable. And I think that is quite a journey that we're all going to face. And, I don't envy your road, as you guys try to navigate and find solutions. But it is, I'm sure we're not the only city that has gone down this path. And I think my only humble suggestion is maybe we look at, maybe some case studies from other cities in California that have had to navigate a similar kind of uncharted territory that we're navigating now, and seeing what solutions they put in place to kind of see how much of that might work for us here, given that it is not going to be an easy journey ahead of us. And, if there's anybody here, I think all of us here want us to be successful, because if we're all successful, then our community wins. So thank you for your time. I appreciate the details.
Mi colega mencionó que esta situación no es ideal, que cree que los residentes tienen que ser más informados para que vean que realmente estamos en una emergencia fiscal. Y sugiere que quizás puedan cortar los beneficios de los empleados y no subir los salarios. Y también ver que han hecho otras ciudades con problemas similares a los que tenemos nosotros, a ver qué podemos aprender de lo que han hecho ellos.
If there's no other questions, I just would like to thank the commission for, oh, one more, okay. I'll do that.
Promise it's only because you reminded me right now that I wanted to ask him this. Quick question. As part of the benefits, since that's one thing that came up, again, for my clarity, does the staff contribute to the medical expenses, or does the city pay for the whole medical expenses?
Pregunta que si los empleados contribuyen a los gastos medicales o cómo, o si lo paga la ciudad.
So we calculate our salary and benefits by doing comparisons to other communities and we have comparable cities. And so they're not Beverly Hills or Santa Monica, they're like cities. And so the salaries and the general benefits are looked at comparatively, and the philosophy the city's had since the dawn of time is try to be at the midpoint of that, not the high end, not the low, but trying to get a certain quality of staff. The less you pay, less quality, the more you pay. That is giving as good a service as we think we could afford. So that's been the philosophy. And the city here forever has paid the Kaiser equivalent of health benefits, the whole amount for staff forever. So it does factor in that we do have in a lot of our positions where the salaries are maybe below the mean, but we add that health benefit in when we're doing the comparison, because it is a draw and people can say that's great. But what we often find is we'll have staff leave here because they look at their pay and they go, I can make $5,000 more a year go into this other city. And then they go there and then they look at their take home and go, hold it. I lost $7,000 in my health payment that I'm contributing, and it doesn't work out. So yes, is the short answer, but do know that there is a factor in there that, and when we compare to other cities, the police side of things, that's very typical to cover that. The rest of the staff, not always typical, but instead of say whatever, I don't know what the single rate is, if it's $1,600 a month or something, other cities may cover $1,200. It's not zero in cities. It's always a portion. So there isn't maybe an extra benefit of $400 a month that might be
So
the
right
city.
about 400 is about.
Maybe on average, each city's different. Some cities are paying 100% like us, but a lot of them are less, but they're not zero. But then our pay tends to trend a little below the mean, and so it does tend to balance out.
So, respondió que todo es calculado comparado a las otras ciudades similares a las de nosotros y tratan de no ser más bajo o más altas como a la media, pero que sí pagan toda la cantidad para los beneficios medicales y usualmente es como Kaiser, pero que es, como dijo antes, es comparado a lo que pagan las otras ciudades, pero que sí sucede que mucha gente sí se va porque hayan que otras ciudades, aunque ellos también pagan todos los beneficios medicales, pueden pagar más.
Is that the last of the questions? Oh,
I have my own
okay.
questions.
Yeah, just,
Yo también tengo mis propias preguntas. Let me see. I'm all lost. I took too many notes now. All right. So I think, yeah, I'm really grateful that this presentation, I do find it different than what was presented at council, and I did see the improvement in it, the more detailed information. And I'm really glad that, and I'm hopeful that council will take this into account, because I do worry about staff morale, about all the vacancies that we have already had, and how that has translated into just I don't want to say a poor service, but I mean, if we have been functioning as a city without having full staff, the services do suffer. And I do worry that if we do freeze benefits, we do freeze salaries, that more staff will leave. And I'm saying this because we just mentioned somebody from development leaving because they found a better opportunity. And it was mentioned at the last planning commission meeting. And I think you asked at the last council meeting whether there are exit interviews being conducted, and it's my understanding that they are, right?
and we try to. Sometimes the staff member doesn't, either the scheduling doesn't work or they don't want to, but we try to where we can, either formally with HR or with, say, their supervisor. In the most recent case, I think one of the factors was a concern for stability for the city going forward. That uncertainty, I think we're going to work our hardest to keep the morale up and to unite everybody and say we can win for another day. But, it's tough to feel certain until we know that, kind of if we get that decision point at a ballot, ideally in June, then, the community will speak what they want, and then the staff will know, is this a city that is okay with less? Then people can make their call, and if they want to maintain, then they can make their call. But between now and, say, that point, or now in November, yes, we're going to struggle to keep the morale up, but we're doing everything we can at the department level, and even we're meeting tomorrow to have a transparent and open conversation with our union leaders, with all our department heads in one meeting, to just talk through, like, how do we together support our staff through this? Because, it's tough work that our staff have to do. Our officers are out there in the middle of the night on the weekend, and they have to put their life on the line and deal with all this stress. Like, our Parks and Rec have to be happy during Winter Wonderland on Thursday. We got to keep things moving despite that stress. So I do appreciate that, the great work everybody does, and we want to make sure that we can keep it together.
So yo mencioné que esta presentación y sí ha sido mejorada de la que presentaron al concilio, en la última junta del concilio, y mencioné que es mi opinión que es importante retener los trabajadores y no perderlos, porque de por sí ya hemos funcionado como ciudad con muchas posiciones vacantes. Y desafortunadamente eso hace que más gente se vaya porque se cansan de la cantidad de trabajo. Y el señor Houston respondió que sí ha sido un problema, que hay gente que sí se ha ido porque por los problemas anticipados financieros, pero que van a tener una junta para tratar de tener soluciones de cómo mejorar esos sentimientos con los empleados. And I do think that losing employees is a big problem, because there is a big amount of money being invested in their training. And it's terrible because, you know, if you train somebody, you give them this experience and they could find another place, another city, then that city benefits from the amount of time, effort, and money being spent on these employees leaving us. So we have to start from scratch. And it sucks to say, but I've often heard our city being referred to as a stepping stone.
And we're not alone. All the cities that, when we talk about that comparison, the cities that are at the middle and below are the training grounds for the cities that pay above that middle. It's, you know, anybody working in any industry. It's like, I'm doing the exact same job and I could work for a competitor for 20% more. You know, I've got a family to feed. Why wouldn't I? And so that's where some of the short-term cuts, you know, we talk about putting off the roof maintenance, deal with the buckets. What does that lead to? Decay and long-term damage. And even talking about, like we tried to highlight the fact, is the problem the staff costs. I would say at 2.97, we stack up against any of these surrounding communities and would be lower than our surrounding communities that are doing the same service. And so if we're talking about, let's trim those more, let's start cutting more benefits, we start moving down below even further, which leads in the short term to savings. You know, yay, we save some money, but the decay happens in the background. We lose good people. We maybe get the second level of person coming in because they can't find work elsewhere, so they'll take us until they're trained and then they're gone. And then the gap of bringing on, like we have dispatchers, right? That's at least 6 months from start to even be functional in that place. Very skilled set, you know, police officers, another at least 6 months. Like that's just to be functional. And then at least another year to be really good. Learning our planning codes compared to even if you came from another city, a year long to get up to speed. So all these take a lot of training. Short-term cuts sound good, but as you move down on the comparable list, we start being a training ground, and that is a concern.
Using the money, yeah. Mencioné yo que es un gran problema perder empleados porque la ciudad invierte dinero entrenando a los empleados y es común que mucha gente entra a la ciudad y el señor Houston mencionó que sí, mucha gente entra a la ciudad porque es más fácil entrar a esta ciudad, agarran la experiencia y el entrenamiento y se van a ciudades más grandes que usualmente pagan más. So no es, y terminamos perdiendo mucho dinero con ese ciclo de gente que viene y se va. As far as people who will be able to qualify for exemptions, like the elderly, is that something that they'll have to apply per utility, or how does that work? Because I know that some of the utilities already have programs for low income elderly. Would low income folks be something that could apply as well, or would we look into that?
That we're doing some research and we need to get more detail before we get to that January meeting. But yes, that's some of the things to take into account, that if, say, someone already has a reduced net cost to their utilities that have been halved or something, then if the percentage is on that reduced rate, then they're actually already getting a deal. You know, if the bill is supposed to be $50 and it's 25, and then it's, say, 7% of 25, then it's already half. So it's like everybody else paying 3.5%. So is there a desire to then cut that even further down to a smaller percent, or exempt? Or is it fair that some percentage is paid? Those are kind of the quirks, and we'd have to work that out. And then is it anyone over 65, or is it a certain income level? We have surrounding communities, so we're gathering more data of how they tend to look at that. And then there is a administrative process to collect these taxes and get them to the city. So you usually contract that with firms that specialize it. And then there could be an application process for income levels. If it's a low income rate, that would have to be submitted periodically. So there's a lot of different ways to do. It's good questions, but we'll come back with more of that detail when we come back in the new year.
Pregunté sobre las excepciones para la gente de mayor de edad que posiblemente van tener reducciones en el tax o no cobro. Y dijo que todavía lo están calculando si va a ser para la gente de mayor edad o también la gente de bajos recursos, pero están viendo qué es lo que hacen las otras ciudades para ver si, por ejemplo, la gente que ya está en esos tipos de problema, si de todos modos le dan el tax, de todos modos va a ser el tax en lo que ya pagan, ya va a ser un costo reducido. Pero es algo que todavía están investigando. Um, and as far as the benefits, CalPERS, you mentioned, I remember several years ago that there were already newer people coming in, their benefits were already reduced, right? Or was that only at the state level?
The state did a statewide cut to CalPERS benefits. So anyone hired after 2012, do I have that right?
2011.
2011, could not qualify for what we call the classic benefits. And yes, so a PEPRA, they call it, and there's an acronym there that I don't know, but it's a reduced rate. Each city has a different classic formula. It depends on what city, but for the PEPRA rate is a reduced rate, like 2% at 62 versus say a city might have 2.5% at 55. So each year you get a percent of your salary added up so each year it adds up. Without getting in the detail of that, yes. So that does help future costs. When we talk about, well, things keep escalating, there actually is sort of a curve that our pension costs keep going up for a number of years in the future, and then actually could start, as long as CalPERS keeps making the same amount in the stock market if there isn't a crash, but if that stayed the same, our cost over time would wind down. However, we do have to pay retirees through till, years and years past when they're here, but all new staff are cheaper. And that's where we're looking at things like insourcing some of our services, that we're going to do a study to see if the average employee coming in at a reduced benefit rate, the cost per hour is less than 6-7 years ago or 10 years ago when we looked at their cost of at the classic level. So the cost for them has gone down, and the fact that prevailing wages have increased the contract rate, we want to reassess and see if maybe our cheaper staff model might be less than contracted out. So this is all part of the analysis we're trying to continually revise to address things like some of these cost cuts that have come our way, that do make new staffing less expensive than it used to be.
Pregunté sobre los beneficios que habían sido reducidos por el estado sobre los beneficios de CalPERS, y contestaron que sí, en el 2011, 2012, los trabajadores que son considerados clásicos tenían mejores beneficios que los más nuevos, y que todo depende de la ciudad, de qué cantidad contribuyen, pero sí están anticipando que en un cierto punto los trabajadores más nuevos sí van a salir más baratos. Pero es algo que sí todavía están analizando.
A couple of things there, just to clarify. In 2011, some agencies started doing like tiered formulas for folks. So, if they were initially like a 2.7 agency, they might have gone down to a 2.0. In 2012, PEPRA officially got signed into law, and that kind of leveled the playing field completely for agencies. And so, as Rob said, longer term, eventually, and this will be a long eventually, we will be at a place where our pension costs are controlled, and we won't have this huge liability. But until then, it's going to be a drain on our resources.
Y clarificó que en el 2012 fue cuando mejoraron las calculaciones por los trabajadores para que todo sea más anivelado, pero que los gastos de pensiones va a ser mucho tiempo que cuando los gastos de pensiones sean más reducidos. So no va a suceder más pronto.
I will just add too, something to think about that isn't always intuitive, but we're in a market. So when we're fighting for labor, everybody's comparing within our market. And so we don't pay for a lot of equivalent positions. Say we have a department head that's in charge of 20 staff and a budget of $10 million. In the private sector, they might make, you know, $400,000 a year, and here they might make 180. So the money's not there, but the benefits often are where you get some of the, you get to serve a community, which some people are willing to cut, but you also get some security, pensions, things like that. So the competition is not always on the salary to the private sector, but the benefit package as well. And so when you're trying to draw as good a people as you can, they look at the pension, they look at the features. If you know, and so in that marketplace, there are certain costs that are part of being in that industry. Like every city around us has pension costs. They have a UAL. They have increasing costs. They're all the same. They all have this new pepper thing, but we're all in it together. We're not paying some exorbitant feature that others don't. Like where other cities haven't abolished their pension plans and converted to 401ks because we actually can't do it. We're our hands are tied if we have this system in place. So, you know, think about it like considering if you're, you know, in a different industry, you may have fixed costs that you're providing, like everyone a vehicle for like a traveling salesperson. Well, that's a fixed cost. Well, let's cut out the vehicle. Well, it's part of what they do. Or maybe an airplane pilot has to have certain maybe living expenses covered and maybe training and, you know, a $10,000 a year refresher course. Or so, you know, part of it too is not necessarily comparing city staff to private sector or something. It's really competitiveness within how all the cities operate to help maybe clarify that if we were to try to hack all the benefits out and everybody else around us has them, it makes it untenable to think that we'll be able to attract anyone. So that's a bit of a difficulty.
Mencionó también que teniendo buenos beneficios para empleados es lo que atrae a la gente que trabaje para la ciudad, que estamos en competencia con industria privada y ellos usualmente pagan más, pero no tienen buenos beneficios. Lo que ha traído a la gente a trabajar para el gobierno son los beneficios, pero si cortamos los beneficios, entonces quiere decir que vamos a traer a menos gente, que quizás unos se sacrificen para dar servicio al público, pero no mucha gente es así. Es muy difícil planear de cortar los beneficios porque sí va a querer decir que vamos a perder empleados o no vamos a traer a gente que tenga la experiencia y la capacidad de hacer el trabajo que necesitamos. I think that was it.
Is that the end of our questions?
Any emails?
No emails. The gentleman I translated for, I think along the way, you answered his questions. One question a comment he had was that the public perception of employees that are visible to the public. He said that employees that are very visible should be aware that the public is watching them. That was one of his comments that he had.
Thank you. Seeing no other comments or questions, can I get a motion to receive and file?
I'll make that motion to receive and file.
Oh, he's asking for an answer.
Sorry, he's asking, what was?
Yo lo que tengo que decir es que yo he visto, ¿ok? No, los grabé, pero los borré. Anyway, pero he visto a muchos trabajadores de que traen las trocas blancas, ¿ok? Que se mantienen en el teléfono sentados por horas y horas sin hacer nada, ¿ok? El otro día vi a unas personas que andaban trabajando tapando unos hoyitos en la calle. que andaban 3 trocas. La que traía la cosa esa negra, se bajaba la persona que iba manejando, le echaba una palita y luego con el pie le hacía así. Y las otras 2 trocas andaban atrás de él, nomás atrás de él, sin hacer nada, no se bajaban para nada de la troca. Y nomás en el teléfono. Se paraba la troca de enfrente a tapar el hoyito y la persona ahí, otra que iba, la que iban atrás, en el teléfono, en el teléfono. Entonces, estamos pagando mucho dinero para traer personas paseándose en las trocas, con el aire acondicionado, no apagan las trocas en ningún momento. Ahí está el dinero que se está yendo. Se está yendo el dinero en los empleados. Yo no estoy diciendo que todos, ¿ok? Estoy diciendo los que yo vi, ¿ok? Pero casi aseguro que el 60-80% de los trabajadores no está haciendo su trabajo. Por eso estamos perdiendo mucho dinero. ¿Que es necesario traer 2, 3 trocas tapando un hoyito? Yo no creo. No lo creo. Entonces, alguien tiene que supervisarlos, yo pienso, para que hagan su trabajo. Yo no digo que no son trabajadores, no estoy diciendo eso. Pero ¿para qué tantas personas para tapar un hoyito? No es justo. Se les está pagando para que hagan un trabajo. Entonces, si no hacen el trabajo, ¿para qué los queremos? No los queremos, o sea, estamos nomás, como uno dice, dando con las llantas del carro, nomás patinando. Yo les prometo que se los voy con el teléfono, se los voy a hacer video para enseñárselos, para que sepan que no estoy echando mentiras. ¿Ok? Para que sepan que están nomás sentados allí y pasa aquí mucho, bueno, ya les voy a decir dónde, aquí en la Saddle. En la Saddle pasa mucho eso donde están acá por la California. Es nomás de que alguien se levante del asiento y los supervise. Es todo. Que los vea. Que no les diga, oh, te voy a ir a ver. No, no, no. Que vaya así de lejecitos que los esté viendo. Porque estamos gastando mucho dinero en los empleados y no están haciendo su trabajo. Te los aseguro que así de esa manera van a ahorrar mucho dinero. Pero mucho dinero. Es nomás de que se levante a alguien y vaya y los vea. No es gran cosa. Un supervisor, el city manager, el que sea, que vaya y los vea qué están haciendo. Claro, que no les diga, hey, te voy a ir a ver, te voy a estar viendo a ver qué haces. Pues claro que van a estar trabajando. Pero si no se les dice nada, ustedes mismos se van a dar cuenta. Así. Así.
¿Me dice su nombre en el
Soy
micrófono?
Rubén. Rubén, un residente de aquí de
Rubén.
Rubén, ¿no?
Ah,
De Sarres. Y yo les recomiendo eso. No sé si lo quieran hacer. Alguien que lo supervise nomás. Es todo. Que lo supervise. Porque estamos gastando otra vez mucho dinero en los empleados y no están haciendo su trabajo. El que haga su trabajo perfecto, hey, está muy bien, que le paguen hasta 2, 3 veces. No le hace. Pero el que no haga su trabajo, ¿para qué lo queremos?
Okay, gracias. Deja-
Gracias.
So Ruben is saying that he believes that workers need more supervision. That he recently saw 3 trucks go to one place to cover a pothole, and only saw one person covering the pothole, while everybody else was just on their phones or in their air-conditioned trucks that didn't even turn off the trucks. And so he's asking, why do we need them? He's not saying everybody's doing this, but that he believes that if there's better supervision, he's saying that maybe 60 to 80% of people aren't doing their work, that he believes if there's better supervision, that, people would be making themselves more useful, that he promises to record and send the city videos next time, but that he's seen it happen on Southern, and that he thinks that the city is spending too much money on folks that aren't doing their job. And so, if there are people doing their job, that, they should get paid 2-3 times more, but that the people who aren't should just be let go. But that's his suggestion.
that kind of went to how he said that he was watching them and that they're very visible to the public and that they should be aware of that people could be recording them, or it's just like the perception that they're on their phones and things like that.
Appreciate that. I think we're open to any comment or any notice that people have of anything, and whether if there's actual, lack of focus from staff members once in a while. Of course, that happens to all of us. I think if I check phone records on anybody, we might have a few glances of a phone during our work week or work day. But if it's out of control, that's a problem. Sometimes it can be a perception of not understanding a situation. Sometimes people will see 6 police cars outside a house and go, really? And they don't know what's going on inside the house. There's certain protocols that are required. Sometimes if we say we need more supervision, one of the people in that truck might be the supervisor, making sure he's training someone, or it could be not. So we're open to getting all that input, and we'll investigate. And we're not perfect. We all can improve. So we appreciate that partnership.
El señor Houston dice que aprecia su comentario y sugerencias, pero que sí está dispuesto a recibir ese tipo de queja y investigar que posiblemente haya una razón porque hay varias gente que vaya a un trabajo y pueden investigar eso y ver si quizás es cuestión de que uno de los empleados esté entrenando o que quizás alguien en una de las trocas sea uno de los supervisores viendo y viendo el trabajo que se está haciendo, pero que sí aprecia su comentario para ver si quizás hay modos de ver qué es lo que está pasando, porque sí entiende que sí da mala vista ese tipo de acción. So, seeing that, I guess, or anything else?
I just wanted to say thanks for the opportunity to come, and I appreciate the attention of the people here from the public, but also the thoroughness of the questions. I think that's great. I apologize again for the translation work you had to do, but it's all good to communicate in whatever language we need to get the word out. And so this is part of that journey. And I've offered this at the other meetings I've had. If there's individuals that want to meet, I've already met with a couple that took me up on, come on down, we'll open up the books. We have nothing to hide. We'll answer questions individually. If there's a group, like a neighborhood group that wants, we can sit in someone's front yard or in a garage, we'll come and talk there. We can do some larger things as well. Having worked on these kind of things in other cities, it can be hard to have, like 100 people in a room and then try to get into detail because, you guys were all really into this for 3 hours, but there's a lot of people that, just want a little taste, or they are really excited about talking about, how often do we change the tires in the police cars, and somebody else's, what kind of police dog do we buy, and could we get a cheaper dog? And so the more people you get in the room, the more it can go everywhere. And so focus can work. The communication is going to go out there, but if you've got people that want to hear something, we can refer them to the online version of this. But if we want to have a meeting, let me know what groups want to hear more, either individually or as a group. And thanks again for the great questions. And together, I think we all need to spread the word. And that's a big point of why we're highlighting our commissioners, because just like, we have our council that are leaders, but you guys are leaders too. People in the community look to you to translate this government gobbledygook into some basic information. Why is the city asking if they put it on the ballot? They're going to be asking you guys why. And the more you know, the more questions you've got to answer, the better you can explain it. They may not come to me, but they may come to you, or they may come to a friend of yours that you've educated. So we got to pass on the info and help make sure everybody, whether they say if it gets on the ballot, whether they vote for or against, the more knowledgeable they are, that's what we're looking for. Let the people make the decision, but let's not have them not know why what's in front of them. So that's the goal. But thank you again.
El señor Houston está apreciando la oportunidad de venir aquí, pide disculpa por no tener la traducción, pero piensa que es muy importante distribuir este tipo de información, aunque no pase a el tax. Lo que piensa él es lo más importante, que el público sea informado de la situación y de las opciones que tienen y que ellos decidan cómo cómo va a proceder la ciudad, y cree que es importante que nosotros como comisionados también seamos disponibles al público y a pasar la información. Y también dice que él está disponible a tener juntas personalmente con el público o con otros grupos en la ciudad para tener y pasar toda esta información y que sea más enfocado el mensaje y la información. So I guess now, can I get a motion to receive and file?
Yes, I'll make that motion to receive and file.
A second.
Second.
All in favor? Or do we need a roll call?
Commissioner Castañeda,
Yes.
Commissioner Osaeta,
Yes.
Commissioner Valenzuela,
Yes.
Vice Chair Prieto,
Yes.
and Chairperson Reese.
Yes.
Motion passes.
So now, item number 10, comments from the audience. Any items not on the agenda?
All right, so I imagine you're going to do this presentation for the Parks and Recreation Commission. I'm begging you, please don't put any other items. Just let it be this. Don't put anything on there other than this because this is just too much. So I'm shocked and appalled by the presentation and really just taken aback at how lazy and neglectful our council members, our wretched council members, not just this current crop, but the previous council members. That I mean, it takes.
So these are items that aren't already
Well,
discussed?
yeah.
This is,
Yeah, I'm getting to it. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Just how neglectful they have been with our city's finances. I mean, to tie this in to where does your city's economic development begin? Well, it isn't Parks and Recreation. It isn't administrative services. It's your community development department. And they've done such a lousy job of running it. This is your economic engine. This is the function and purpose of your Department of Community Development is to nurture and grow your business community. The purpose of your business community is to create the sales tax and pump out the sales tax revenue that your city needs in order to pay its expenditures. Because of our council members' years long of neglect and abandoning and paying attention to nurturing, growing our business community, our sales tax revenue is trash. It's insufficient. And you have these three entities. You have the Department of Community Development. You have the Tweedy Mile Association. You have the Tweedy Mile Advisory Board. You have Southgate Chamber of Commerce. All of these organizations I just mentioned, they're all garbage. They're all trash. They don't know how to collaborate. They don't know how to work with one another to nurture and build our city's business community. They should be collaborating and seeking how to help one another so that we have a healthy, thriving business community. If you don't have a healthy, thriving business community, it's just not going to happen. You're not going to have the sales tax revenue that you need to pay for your expenditures, and that's one aspect. The other component to it is the residents. The residents need to be informed that if they go elsewhere and spend their money in other cities like Downey, Lakewood, Cerritos, these are the cities I like to go to, Montebello. Well, what happens is you're contributing to that city's wealth and prosperity, and this is something that I was ignorant of prior to participating in these city council meetings. I didn't know how a city works, how a city generates funds, how it sustains itself, how it's self-sustaining. And this is how you do it. You have to contribute, your residents have to contribute to your local businesses so that way your sales tax revenue is going straight into your general fund, and you're able to pay your city's expenses. And this is something I was just very ignorant of, that whenever you go elsewhere to another city and you're spending your money elsewhere, you're contributing to that city's wealth and prosperity. This is something that the residents need to know, that they're a part of this, and they are key contributors to their city's wealth. But going back to our council members.
Mario, I hate to interrupt, but that's your 3 minutes.
Thank you, sir. Till next.
All right.
El señor Domínguez se quejó del desarrollo de los negocios comunitarios. Piensa que tienen que desarrollarse para que puedan traer más dinero con los impuestos. Se está quejando de las organizaciones aquí de la ciudad que no trabajan juntas para mejorar los negocios. Y piensa que los residentes tienen que ser más educados para que entiendan que tienen que gastar el dinero aquí en la ciudad y no ir a otras ciudades para que el dinero de esos impuestos se quede aquí en nuestra ciudad. Any other comments? Any written comments?
We didn't get any written comments.
No? Oh. Any city staff comments?
Yeah. Thank you, Chair Ruiz. Just a few things I wanted to announce that the Planning Commission Academy is open for registration. I know we were talking about the budget and saving money, but one of the things that we do regularly mention to the Planning Commission is that there is a Planning Commission Academy that's available for next year. It's going to be at the Sheraton Park Hotel in Anaheim on Wednesday, March 11th through Friday, March 13th of 2026. In case you're interested, you can contact me and I can give you more information about that. We're also at the end of the year, so we have a few meetings coming up. Next one being December 16th, which we really don't have any items for that one. It looks like we're going to go dark for the next meeting. So our next meeting is going to be next year at some point. The January 6th meeting is a little bit tough because we also have a few meetings or a few items for that. And there's also City Hall will be closed from Wednesday, December 24th. We're going to reopen on January 5th of next year. And so it'll be tough just to make that meeting. But in case the commission does want to have that meeting, or if you have any items you want to talk about that we can put on there, let me know. Otherwise, the meeting after that would be the January 20th meeting, and we have some items that are queued up for that meeting. Yes, January 20th. So other than that, just wish the commission happy holidays since we're at the end of the year, and we'll see you next year.
Thank you. You too. So John mencionó que va a haber una academia para los comisionados de planificación, como una convención en Anaheim el año que viene, en marzo 11 al 13. Y la siguiente junta está para el 16 de diciembre, pero quizás no va a pasar. Y mencionó que las oficinas de la ciudad van a estar cerradas entre diciembre 24 hasta enero 5. So, posiblemente la siguiente junta va a ser hasta el 20 de enero. Y nos desea a todos felices festividades.
And Chairwoman, I had a quick update.
Oh, yeah,
That's
go
okay.
ahead.
So Gabriel Perez, I'm your Community Development Director. Just want to give you an update on or a report back on something. So I know a recurring item that comes up in Planning Commission meetings is about razor wire and electric fences in the city. So I just wanted to give an update. I think also staff has been doing some investigation that I think is going to be helpful for the Planning Commission. As far as the electric fencing, and this is a little odd to be able to say, because it reminds me of housing law in the state. There was a law passed in 2024 called AB 2371 for electrified security fences. So when that was passed in 2024, it does allow commercial and industrial properties to be able to install electrified security fences. Now, without a discretionary approval from a city. And so they don't have to demonstrate proof of theft or vandalism. And so it really overrides our ability, like the Planning Commission, to make a decision about electrified fence. And so it is something that was passed statewide. I'm assuming because a lot of industrial and commercial properties deal with theft. It does not apply to residential properties. So residential properties cannot install electrified fences. Because it is electrified fence, I think it would be appropriate for us to require an electric permit. So in the case of Schultz Steel, they did install electric fence, but there is no electric permit that was pulled for that. So I think at the very least we could require that, or maybe have a registration system so that we know where all these electric fences are being installed. Now, this law isn't in effect into perpetuity. It does expire in 2028. So I don't know what the state is going to do by 2028. Sometimes they could decide to extend it. So we'll keep the Planning Commission updated because I know that could be of concern. But it does override some of our local control if we want electric fences or not. So I just wanted to give you that update there. As far as barbed wire fences, just kind of some history, at least from what I've been able to take from this. And, I've been here, about 7 months. So just trying to understand the barbed wire fences that are out there. We don't have a lot of historical context for this because of the staff that's in planning to be able to understand the zoning ordinances that we've adopted over time. But in our research, prior to 2015, there was a big zoning ordinance overhaul at that time. Now there's language in our code that says barbed wire is not permitted. Prior to 2015, the code did not talk about it, right? So when it's, usually when it's omitted or not discussed, it's considered prohibited. In 2015, the council, staff, and identified language to specifically prohibit it. And I'm thinking usually that's the case because they want to make it very direct that it's just not allowed. So a lot of these fences that you do see out there, because I think one of the example was like Rio Avenue. There's a lot of locations throughout the city that has security fencing in terms of what I mean by security fencing is the barbed wire or razor wire. So it's pretty pervasive. I'm not sure when they were installed, but when you go back to Street View for Google, you'll see it back all the way to like 2006 or 2007, whenever it started, right? And that includes a lot of the properties on Rio. You see it on the other side of the 710 freeway on a lot of our industrial properties. So to be able to address that in a more comprehensive way is going to require some effort from staff. Right now, I have 2 full-time code enforcement officers, so it is a challenge. And in the past, the code officer had to address 5 different areas in the city of Southgate for a city of 94 to 96,000 people. So it's a very limited amount of staff. The city where I came from, we had about 6 code enforcement staff for a population of about 45,000 people. So it is a lot of work to be able to catch to be able to address this. So we want to have something that's comprehensive. The reason why the barbed wire fencing is probably there on these properties is likely because of security concerns, right? And it's not only a security concern probably in our city, it's a concern probably in cities throughout the state. That's why there's an electric fence state law that was passed. So I do want to mention, I did look at the code. There is one part of the code that does identify, it's called security fencing. It's 11.30.070. And it looks like it does give some discretion for the director to be able to allow different types of fencing that isn't automatically allowed in the code. So some language I just want to refer to as additional wall height and design features for security fencing may be permitted on a case-by-case basis. And this would be a director level determination. Now, do I want to use that to be able to approve barbed wire? I don't know if the language is strong enough to be able to say we should start approving all these barbed wire fences if we start talking to these individual industrial property owners. But what we will be doing soon, and we're working on this right now, is we're working on some zoning code updates. And one of the things that we're looking at is amendment to our fencing and wall requirements. So it is something that we will bring back to the Planning Commission to identify when is it appropriate for barbed wire fencing? And if it isn't appropriate, is there an alternative security fencing that we'd like to see on properties? So you're going to be able to participate in that discussion. And obviously we want to understand from you as being the planning commissioners, what would be acceptable in the city. And that will be recommendation that moves on to the city council. So I just want to give you some background there, and I'm happy to answer any questions about it. We're still doing some more investigation about this too. But I know it has been brought up as a concern. If there are questions about this, I'm also happy to follow up individually with planning commissioners as well.
Thank you.
And I do want to wish you all a happy holidays, because if we don't have the next meeting, it's been great working with the commission.
Thank you, you too. So Gabriel Pérez, el director de Desarrollos Comunitarios, nos da información sobre una pregunta que hizo mi colega anteriormente sobre los alambres filosos que ha visto por el rayo o ciertas propiedades, y el director dijo que se enteró que el Estado pasó una ley que permite que haya bardas eléctricas, que entonces eso porque es ley estatal que pasó, la ciudad no puede hacer nada sobre las bardas eléctricas, pero sobre las bardas los alambres, las bardas que tienen alambres filosos, investigó que la ciudad no tenía ley contra eso, pero que cuando la ciudad actualizó leyes de zona en el 2015, sí hubo lenguaje que puso más restricciones con alambres filosos, pero el problema que tiene es que solo hay 2 oficiales de enforzamiento de código, y dio el ejemplo que en otra ciudad en la que trabajó, que tenía menos residentes, tenían 6 oficiales. Pero dijo que ahorita están planeando hacer más actualizaciones para los códigos, y que sí, él tiene permiso de permitir ciertos bardas, pero él no piensa que vaya a hacer eso o que tenga demasiado poder para hacer eso. Pero cuando se actualicen, van a traer esas proposiciones a esta esta comisión, y así nosotros podemos participar en esa decisión que se vaya a proponer. Y también nos desea a todos felices festividades. Any comments from my planning commissioners here, or questions?
I have a quick question. Regarding just to confirm, so there are no permits required to install the fencing? The electrical
The
fencing?
electric fencing. So the ones that were installed at Schultz Steel, there was no permit that was pulled. But if anything, right, like our hands are kind of tied by the state, but we can require electric permit. It doesn't make sense to request that. So, so our intent is to go back to them and say, hey, there needs to at least be electrical permit that's pulled here. But we'll have to, if it meets the standards for electrical permit, we'll have to approve it.
So it's for more of a safety reason, right? Just to make sure that it was installed correctly, there aren't any issues or anything like that. And then my other question is regarding the razor wire. I think the residents that were pointing out razor wire that had been there probably for about a year. So I don't know if it's, maybe we can talk offline, but they were referring to the one that off of the railroad track going.
Okay.
So I can
Yeah, let me
probably
get that.
provide a little bit more on that.
If we can get the address, that would
Yeah.
be great.
Yeah, I don't know the address. I just,
Okay.
they're just sharing with me, but I can probably go find out. I can
Okay.
ask.
Let's connect.
And then the other concern I think you were going to report on is the illegal fence at the tow company.
Oh, okay, yeah. Okay, you want an update on that? And I don't know if you want help out with that too, but so Mr. C's Towing is a existing tow site off of Royal Avenue, and there was a fence that was installed, and it's come up a few times and concerns that it was installed without a permit. That's correct, right? So we've been addressing it with the applicant to be able to bring that fence down. There is plans to bring that fence down by the date that we identified for them is March 15th, where it comes down and it's replaced by a fence that can be permitted. The intent of that fence or the wall is for it to be compatible with the adjacent wall that Amazon constructed to the north, which I think has been an attractive wall. They are proposing some landscaping as well. It is going to take some time for them to do it. We wish it could be tomorrow, but it is going to take some time for the permitting. And there is some coordination that they have to perform with the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, because of how the soil needs to be addressed in terms of any kind of soil disturbance. So we're hoping all that can take place between now and March 15th. So there is a plan in place.
Thank you. And there's no like planning design for any of that needs to get approved?
No, a perimeter wall can be approved at the administrative level.
Okay, cool.
So they want to do that.
Cool. Thank you, Gabriel.
So, también preguntó sobre la barda eléctrica de Schultz Steel, si no tienen que tener permiso, y Gabriel dijo que sí, él piensa que tienen que tener permiso eléctricos o por lo menos pueden pedir que saquen eso con la ciudad. Y también preguntó por la propiedad de Mr. C's, los que se llevan los carros.
Las grúas.
Las grúas, los de las grúas, y preguntó sobre la barda, el alambre filoso que tienen, y dijo que trató de clarificar que a él le habían dicho los residentes que viven por allí que ese alambre solo lleva como un año allí, no más mucho tiempo. Y dijo también preguntó sobre la barda que tienen ahí en la Rayo, y Gabriel dijo que sí van a tener que bajar la estatura, y también que tiene que complementar la barda que tienen enfrente los de Amazon. Y también tienen que trabajar con la agencia estatal que está limpiando la contaminación que tienen en la tierra. So, sí van a tener sus límites. That's all. Any other questions from my colleagues?
Thank you.
I was going to ask about just updates on some of the proposed projects. I know you mentioned in the council meeting that you were going to try and have like some sort of website or link on the website giving updates on those, but I was kind of wondering more of things that kind of touch on planning, like what is it, the JB Hunt, what's happening with that, whether they're going to go into the EIR process, and whether or when that information is going to be available, and also the facility, the Engel property. I saw that there was some sort of air study. So I was wondering whether or not where in the process are they of this, ¿cómo se dice? I'm stuck in Spanish now. In vacating the property. So le pregunté sobre los proyectos que van a tener en la ciudad, en la Junta del Concilio. Mencionaron que van a tener una página en el website disponible para dar la información o también al concilio de en qué parte de los proyectos de desarrollo están en la ciudad. Y pregunté yo sobre JB Hunt, el proyecto de JB Hunt, que está ahí al lado del freeway, sobre qué se va a decidir, si van a tener que hacer un reporte ambiental. Y también pregunté sobre el proyecto de los Engels, que está por la Alameda, que se supone que ya tienen que desalojar la propiedad. Y están haciendo estudios también ambientales.
Yes, Chair and Commission. I think maybe it would be good to do the next meeting that we have or an upcoming one is maybe the same presentation we made to council, because I thought there was a lot of items there that made sense for the commission to hear about. As we're talking about the budget, there was a lot of things that we're working on that's also about being more efficient with our resources in the community development department, right? So, we're not waiting for the utility users tax to be able to do that. We're doing this on an ongoing basis. So we could do that, and as well as figure out how to give you updates about the projects. Just keep in mind, we can't go into a lot of discussion with you about it because you're going to be considering those at a future date.
So, contestó que sí piensa que van a hacer esa misma presentación aquí, porque sí es información que sí nos afecta a nosotros como comisionarios, y también, pero que va a haber límites porque hay posibilidad que esos proyectos vengan a pedirnos algo. So tenemos que mantener nuestra objetividad.
I was going to ask Gabriel, maybe, so we're going to have a lot of downtime. Maybe one of the upcoming meetings we can use kind of as an informational session, even if it's maybe not specifically to the applicant, but maybe on a topic that maybe it'd be good for us to get more information on that might be coming down the pipeline, just to maximize like your time and just the limited time we have together. Every time we get a chance to talk to you, we learn something. So I appreciate it.
Mi colega pidió que como no hay proyectos, que quizás utilicemos la siguiente junta para aprender algo, que nos hagan otra presentación. Any other questions or comments?
Great job, Liz. Thank you. Yeah, great.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Ugh,
Yeah.
thanks.
Thank you.
So seeing none, I'll call this meeting to order at 9:38.
Meeting
And
adjourned. huh?
Adjourn, sorry.